primarily due, that was a company that I reported in January, so the last quarterly report. One of the folks that was in the open space biz sprout became employee number 1 for Aspiratory Ventures, and they're maintaining their membership in the open space until their office space opens up in downtown. They're taking over a big chunk of the old ballyhoo space in Bodo, and looks like we're going to have them for another week. They've got keys to the office, but they got no furniture, so they'll be operating our place for another couple of weeks. The other thing I think of note is CloudSpot, one of the companies that's been in the open space now for about 5 months, is now preparing to raise money in Seattle, and their goal has been from the beginning that if and when they raise money, that they'd open an operations center someplace in the Treasure Valley, because they think it's too expensive to run the kind of operation they need to run in Seattle. So I'll keep you posted on that one, and we should hear in the next couple of weeks about whether or not they've started fundraising and how much they intend to raise. So we may see a little bit of a spinoff from that. I do continue to have a waiting list, and I've got 4 companies as of yesterday that are on the waiting list. And I've said to all of them, we've tried to find office space, what I consider reasonable office space in downtown Meridian. We haven't been able to find it, and so they know that they're on a waiting list, and they know that, I don't see anybody leaving in the group that we've got for at least 4 months. So they said keep us on the list and keep us informed. So we're backed up. Events and meetings, we're up a little bit from the previous quarter. By about 10 meetings, and again, you can see the people that have taken up most of the event and meeting space are listed there. I expect that to be even a little busier because we've got some things with Treasure Valley Children's Theater and a couple of other groups that will, the Project Management Institute will do a 3-day training and then a quarterly meeting, and so I expect that those numbers to go up even in July and August. And then the last portion are the financials, and you can see that revenue's up slightly, expenses are up even less, and that we're actually making slightly more money. And again, I think on that end we're probably about maxed out in terms of what that building can produce in revenue without significant increases in charging people for meetings. And I stand for questions.
Awesome, thank you, Rick. Council, any questions?
None?
Sure.
Mr. Borton.
Come on.
I'm going to ask you something.
Okay.
A couple things. Is there anything that the city can do that maybe we're not doing to facilitate either the handoff of those that are looking for space but you can't provide it, or are outgrowing your space, to the area brokers, not only in our downtown but throughout the Meridian, that ideally they'd be here and can learn from you that you've got these types of individuals that might need small offices, that the Primes and the Lees and whatnot could help you help them.
Councilman Borton, I'm not sure there's anything the council can do. I keep in pretty close touch with everybody that I know. There's some kind of a real estate person in downtown Meridian. In fact, we used Ron Ramza to find aspiratory venture space in downtown Boise. Okay. So other than if you hear of something, you know of somebody who's in that business and they get wind of something that's coming up, advance notice before it goes on the market is always good, because that gives us a chance to get in and particularly the commercial real estate guys I'm talking to at least monthly, trying to keep track of what's going on, and then I'm regularly on LoopNet trying to make sure what's open and what's not open, and the big issue is we're just struggling with what's in downtown. I'd love to keep everything in downtown, but where is the next question?
Sure.
I would add to that, one of the interesting things that I think you'll see happen in the next 6 months is the folks that are at Aspiratory Ventures, even though they've taken space in Bodo downtown, their intent as they spin out those businesses is to spin them into Meridian. The guy, Jonathan Aspiratory, who is from California, who put this together, wants the companies to be in Meridian, even though his office is in downtown Boise. And again, we're going to bump into the problem of they're working on one currently. They'll start work on 2 more the end of the month. You know, no telling how long it takes for them to get to a place where they need to be, you know, out on their own in their own space. But it's just sort of a forewarning that that's coming, and we need to be thinking about what are we going to do. So that's, I think that gets further complicated by that, and then we've got sort of the same thing. In fact, the person I put in the conference room is one of those companies that comes from Empathy Ventures. You know, we talked about that earlier, and that's his first company that he's basically shifted from California back to here because of the least cost in terms of, he figures he can get about twice as much runway time by sending those companies here and spending the same amount of money as he does in California. And so I would expect, I haven't talked to him to know that he's got another one in the wings, but I would expect that we're going to get another one from that one before we get too far too. Okay. So this problem's not going away, I guess is my point. So anytime you hear a space, let me know. If brokers have got space, let me know. In fact, I've been keeping an eye on this building down on Pine, waiting for them to do something with that one, because when we, you know, once they, I think they're done tearing the insides out, look like they're putting it back in, we'll be after that one before too long.
Okay.
Other questions?
Madam Mayor, the one that I thought that came to mind that's not necessarily a broker, but has the space at times is James, just up the street, has those individual kind of incubator office opportunities, full and wider.
Oh, yeah, I have not talked to individual current owners. Mostly it's through commercial brokers and that sort of thing.
He may be one worth visiting because he has that type of space
Okay.
available in his building.
That's a great thought. I'll go by there and have a conversation with him.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Don't see any other questions. Appreciate the.
Thank you. See you in a quarter.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, item 6B is under our CDBG, and I'll turn this over to Chris.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, good to be here today. So today's presentation is to kind of orient you all to some of the new projects that we have that we're recommending for funding for this upcoming year's program year. There are going to be a few of the projects that we've recommended that I've introduced to you over the last few weeks that you're not going to be hearing about today. The general reasoning behind that is because they're kind of repeat offenders, if you will. They're projects and organizations that we've funded frequently in the past. If you have questions about any of those, I'm willing to try and facilitate some of those. I see that Dan is here in the audience today, so if there's anything you need from the food bank or have any questions for the food bank, I think that we can put him on the spot if needed. But generally speaking, these organizations and these groups about these projects will report at future meetings throughout the coming months to kind of give you an idea. But if you have any questions now in the immediate term about these projects regarding this upcoming program year, I can try and facilitate getting answers for you outside of this meeting. Otherwise, I kind of wanted to focus the time and attention today on 3 new projects and 2 new organizations that we haven't funded previously to give you an idea of what the projects are, who's representing them, let you put a face to the project, and kind of introduce it that way. So the 3 presentations that you'll hear today won't be from me. They'll be from representatives of each of these organizations. The first will be John from the Meridian Library District. They have applied for funding and we're recommending that you fund them to the amount of $77,970 for some ADA upgrades to their restrooms. Following John's presentation, Ashley from MDC will give a presentation about their project that they're looking at, trying to receive $180,000 of CDBG funds for along East 3rd Street right-of-way improvements. And then lastly, representatives from the West Ada School District will talk about their Housing Plus High School Equals Success program, which is aimed at helping to meet the housing needs of those who are in high school and are homeless. So I've instructed each of these groups that they've got 3 minutes to present, so you can hold them to that. But this is also hopefully an opportunity to facilitate some conversation if you have questions. These are new projects. They're not necessarily things we have experience with, particularly with the library district and the school district. We haven't worked with them in the past through this program. So there may be questions that you may have about the partnership and how that's going to look in the future. Feel free to ask them questions here. Before we jump into those presentations, next week we'll have a public hearing on all of the projects. And the following week I'll come to you again with a finalized version of our annual action plan, asking for your, I guess, formal approval of it through a resolution. So this isn't an opportunity. We're not talking about funding decisions right now. Again, this is just a presentation of information about what staff is recommending to you all regarding how to use these funds in the coming year. With that, I'll invite John to come up here. He's the Public Services Manager for the Meridian Library District and talk about what they have going on.
Welcome, John. Thank you, Chris.
Mayor and council. Thank you, Chris. So I'm John Thill. I'm the Public Services Manager at the Meridian Library, and what we are requesting for the CBDC Community Development Block Grant Funds is $77,970. It's based on a quote that we got from a reputable construction management company, Benetton, who's done a lot of public works projects in the past throughout the city and also for West Ada as well. And what it entails is basically upgrades to our bathrooms to make them ADA compliant. The project addresses entryways that are too narrow, corridors which cannot be navigated in a wheelchair currently, fixtures that are at the wrong heights based on ADA guidelines, toilets, soap dispensers, paper towel holders, etc. Accessible stalls which are too narrow for ADA guidelines, and inadequate lighting. So right now our lighting levels are very low, so it's not conducive for people that want to use it, have a low vision. Here's a picture of one of the entryways to our bathrooms. If you can imagine yourself in a wheelchair trying to get into this bathroom door, this door actually opens outward as well. It's next to impossible to navigate and turn and then pull the door open and enter it in a reasonable amount of time or without getting stuck. We've had a lot of people get stuck in the hallway there, and we've also had one person fall out of their chair trying to get into the space. Women's restroom has a similar kind of hallway issue that also causes that kind of problem. So that's the most, obvious visual kind of representation. There's lots of other things within the restrooms, the lighting and the fixtures, which are not up to standards as well, but they're not as visually apparent. The project serves Meridian residents with disabilities, especially mobility and sight disabilities. And then our service area at Cherry Lane, where this project would take place, consists of all of Meridian north of the freeway. Southern part of the city is served by Silverstone. All of the city's designated low to moderate income areas are within our service area, and at least 17,000 low to moderate income individuals would be served by the project. And we have more than 1,000 visitors per day to the library who would benefit from the upgrades to the bathrooms. As far as logistics go, we have a project plan in place. We have staff at multiple levels with experience with large-scale project management, and staff with extensive grant reporting experience for a complex grant like this, which shouldn't be a problem, and an outlined method for verification of the success of the project. And I'll stand for questions.
Less than 3 minutes.
Right.
Good job, John. Council, any questions? Thank you so
thank you
much
for your
for
time.
walking us through it.
And next we'll have Ashley.
Good afternoon.
Members of the council, Madam Mayor. For the record, I'm Ashley Squires, the administrator with Meridian Development Corporation, and I'm going to try to be less than 3 minutes, if at all possible. Sorry, my asthma's been plaguing me a little bit today. One of the true catalysts for downtown Meridian hinges on a consolidation project, and many of you know that ProBuild has leased and utilized the UP property on the south side of Broadway Avenue between Main Street and East 5th for many years. ProBuild is consolidating their operations from the east side of East 3rd Street towards East 5th. And this allows us, as MDC, a rare and unique opportunity to be able to negotiate a lease with Union Pacific and to allow for the removal of the current blight between Main Street and East 3rd. And with this lease, this will allow MDC to provide much-needed public parking, which in turn will allow for other developments in the downtown core. Excuse me. With the consolidation, certain infrastructure improvements are triggered per ACHD. East 3rd Street is in need of right-of-way improvements that, as there's no curb, gutter, sidewalk, there is a ditch that runs on the east side of East 3rd Street that needs to be tiled. This project will create a complete street section for the east side of East 3rd Street from Broadway to the rail line. These improvements have been previously identified by MDC and the City of Meridian as important improvements for downtown connectivity. In order to not lose this opportunity to recognize the vision that I think both MDC and the city has for our downtown, MDC has offered to partner with ProBuild on this project. The consolidation truly does create a fantastic opportunity and allows for the elimination of one of the most blighted properties in our community, and I think we all agree upon that. The total project cost for the design and construction is estimated to be $350,000. MDC is requesting $180,000 in CDBG funds, with MDC funding the rest in fiscal year 19. Without CDBG funding, the likelihood of this important project to move forward in the timeframe needed is severely diminished, and much needed and long desired opportunity may be missed. And we would respectfully request your approval. Thank you, and happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Council, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Try it? Oh, gosh. I'm doing it backwards. I'm sorry, guys. I'm used to standing up there. This is Annie, Molly, and Sydney, social workers who will help kind of run this program at the school district, here to kind of talk about it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Well, the program we're going to talk about is called High School Plus Housing Equals Success, and it's
Molly,
a program.
if you can introduce yourself.
Oh, yes,
that
I'm
would be
Molly
awesome.
Patchen, and then this is
Molly.
Sydney Saucer and Annie Edwards. And we're all social workers with the school district. And the program we're talking about is High School Plus Housing Equals Success, and it was founded underneath the Education Foundation in 2014 to help provide housing stipends for unaccompanied youth who are ages 18 to 21. And an unaccompanied youth is an individual who is experiencing homelessness and is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian, usually due to either them being kicked out of their home or them leaving a precarious situation because of it being unsafe or unstable for some reason. And so our goal is to assist these individuals in acquiring stable housing, as they often are couch surfing and living with other friends or in unstable situations between residences or cars or vehicles because they don't have housing available. And so the requirements of our program are that they have to be between the ages of 18 to 21, so they're legally an adult, enrolled in an area high school. They have to maintain good grades and attendance, not engage in illegal behavior, and they have to complete an application that's approved by the High School Plus Housing Board. And then the housing stipends are currently $100 a month, and they are paid directly towards the landlord. And the landlord has to also do an application and agree to not put them in an unsafe situation and also in a drug-free and alcohol-free environment.
So in this last school year, the 2017-2018 school year, we assisted 10 students with these housing stipends, with a total of 28 stipends sent directly to the landlords. We had 13 students approved, but 3 of these students did not choose to use the program for various reasons. The average number of months that we assisted these students was 2. The previous year, it was 4 in a row, and so it varies depending on the student need. 10 out of 10 of these students graduated this year, and 7 out of 10 are accepted to college and planning to attend in the fall. And our program has grown since the beginning when we started it. So in 2015-2016 school year, we only had about $1,500 that we were able to give out to students. In the 2016-2017 school year, about $4,800, and then this last school year, almost $7,000. So our funding that we currently have for this upcoming school year is $6,000 right now. And that's why we are asking for $10,000 in the CDBG funds, hoping to increase and expand our programs.
So like Sydney said, our budget for next year is about $6,000, which would just allow us to continue as is, providing $100 a month stipends, and we could assist approximately 10 to 12 students. The CDBG grant would allow us to assist more students and provide assistance for a longer period of times, as well as expand the program in a number of ways. So one of the ways we'd like to expand is by offering stipends in larger amounts based on student need. So for example, last school year I had a student who was trying to decide whether or not to use his money that he was working for to do car repairs or to pay his rent. And so we were able to increase his stipend amount to allow him to use his money to pay for his car and maintain his housing, so he was able to keep going to work, keep going to school, and maintain his residence and not face eviction. So those are the kinds of things we'd like to be able to look at and be able to meet student needs on a situational basis. Additionally, we'd like to look at helping students with rental application fees, first or last month's rent, deposits, things like that for students who are trying to secure their own permanent housing, and assist with utility bills or things like that for students who are experiencing financial need to help keep utility bills current and prevent eviction. We'd like to leave you with a testimony from a landlord that we received at the end of the school year. It said, "Hi, I got a check in the mail yesterday. Thank you so, so much. The student told me if it wasn't for you guys, he wouldn't have continued to go to school. It's people like you who make kids feel like they matter enough to get an education and make a life for themselves. I hope when I have kids one day that they have educators as awesome as you guys. Thank you for being a safe place." So we're happy to stand for any questions that you guys have.
Thank you so much. Mr. Burt.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much for making this presentation today. Very insightful. I just have one question. How many people or kiddos are turned away because of a lack of funds that you guys have? I mean,
Turned away from rentals, you mean? Or
just
turned
like,
away?
you know, they aren't able to take advantage of this program because there's not enough money for them.
I don't know that we've ever tracked that data specifically. I think we just try to be careful with it because all of our donations are just, we have some corporations that are donated. We did a Dutch Bros fundraiser at one point, so our funds are limited. So we try to make sure that the funds that we're using are just for the neediest of the needy student. So I don't know that we've ever tracked how many are turned away.
Like, for example, if one student would be approved for funding starting in September when the school year starts, and if they had the $100 every month, that would be $900 for an entire school year for one student. And with our current funds of $6,000, depending upon where we got down to with funds, students might have the potential of getting turned away, you know, if we didn't have the funds there. And it also just depends on, we approve them and hope that each month they have passing grades and attendance, but sometimes their grades aren't passing, so they don't receive it for a month or two, and then, you know, come March, their grades are passing, and then they receive it then. So making sure we have enough funds to cover a student that we said they had the housing assistance available, and then if it's not there just because they're not playing, you know, they're not doing their part for a month or two, we'd hope the funds would still be there and not have to say, I'm sorry, you know, towards the end, we don't have any more funds available.
And like we said, our average assistance last year was 2 months, so that's $200 for a student. But the student I spoke about with the car repairs, we spent $1,200 on that student because we were able to increase the stipend amount for a couple months to offset his budget, so he was able to maintain both transportation and housing. So it varies.
Mayor Follow? So how many kids do you think out there who would really need this type of money, roughly?
Well, we identified 131 unaccompanied youth in the West Ada School District last year. So we were hoping 10 to 12. So I think we could easily, I mean, and that's not all high school, all students who would qualify for this program. We had about 60 seniors last year who would potentially fall into this program that might qualify. We'd like to see more, for sure, that we could help.
I think for us, with increased funding, we know we have the funds available to be able to support more students. We don't want them to say, we can't support you if we don't have the funds there. So we maybe have been a little bit more conservative with the amount that we've approved because we want to make sure that they have the help because, you know, they're already in really hard situations. So we don't want to say we can help you and then not be able to and put more of a burden in their situation because we want to take those burdens away so that way they can maintain employment and graduate high school and then, you know, contribute back to the community as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
I'm just struggling with the term unaccompanied youth when they're all adults. But
HUD actually defines a youth experiencing homelessness as anybody 24 and under. So if that helps. And they're high school, they're all enrolled in high school. So that's just if that kind of helps you as well.
And government trying to cradle to grave us, but I'm sure also how many people are 21 years old and in high school? How does that
So you
happen?
can legally attend high school up until age 21. And so we have students that come back that maybe have dropped out due to these homeless situations, things like that, and come back and try to finish. They might only have a handful of credits, like 2 or 3, to come back and get their high school diploma. But we do have a decent amount of, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we do have a decent amount of 19 and 20-year-olds that come back that we help who are trying to get their diploma so they can go on and become contributing members of society, maybe go to college, things like that, go to a Voc Tech program. So they're out there for sure.
Madam Mayor, my favorite part of this is that the 2-month, especially when it's publicly funded assistance for things, the shorter the better for me, and being able to provide the counseling and then the funds to ensure that people have the tools to be able to succeed after a very, very short period of time. So I really appreciate that it's not a perpetual cradle to grave kind of, we'll take care of you kind of thing. So thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Kevner.
Thanks. One, thank you. Anyone who works with our students, I think, are to be commended, but I know that day in and day out you work with those that are finding not the most pleasant side of school or home and all of that combined. So really applaud you for bringing this idea. I know this is something the district's been working on for a long, long time. I want to talk a little bit about your budget and dollars requested. The first 2 presentations that kind of came before us, they were more, let's build it and then we're done with it. And I always get really nervous about when we allocate CDBG funds to a program that there's this built-in expectation from those recipients that they're going to get those dollars year over year. And you talk to some of our recipients and they do their budget planning kind of with this expectation that we'll get our CDBG dollars each year and then we can use that to run our program. So when I saw, I think that your budget for your program this year is $6,000, but then you're asking for $10,000 additional dollars for CDBG. I want to make sure that what happens if next year the federal government says, oh, we're not giving Meridian any dollars. Councilmember Palmer has piped off too many times and we're not going to give the city any more money. You'd consider that a victory. I would not. And so talk to me about how that would impact your organization and the work that you're doing. Is that you go kind of this kind of steady growth a year with, and I fully believe that you guys are going to be available to spend every dollar that you receive, but then the following year that drops down. What does that do to your program?
I think we just go back to the basics of what it was. I think what the CDBG grant is really helping with us is that expansion piece. I think it's worked as is with the $100 a month stipends. We just see that there's a lot more need than that, and there's a lot of students who have other needs that we'd like to meet, like the rental deposits. That's something that we've never been able to even come close to offering or look at. And so if we could help a student get a stable housing before they graduate from high school, that benefits everybody, right? Because then they're stable, they're able to go to work, they're able to go to college, things like that. I think if we don't have this funding again, we just go back to what we were doing, and we've also been able to maintain a lot of donors that have in other fundraising projects, things like that. And so I think we just keep pounding the pavement, for lack of a better word, and just keep finding those donors. We found somebody this year that donated, was it $5,000 that they donated to us just for this program? And so we'll just keep putting the need out there and hope that we can find more donors that way.
Madam Mayor, maybe a couple clarifying questions then. So is it your intention that if you are to be a recipient, that you would use these dollars to provide care for or provide services for more people, or increase the amount that you're offering kind of with the same amount of people, or is it a combination thereof? Maybe I missed that piece.
A combination thereof. So we'd like to do, I think we just like to have the funds available to do what our students need. We can't anticipate what those needs might be until the next school year. So like I said, that car repair example, we increased that student stipend from $100 to $250 for 2 months. And so he was able then to maintain that transportation, things like that. So we want to be able to just have the funds to be able to help our students situation by situation, whatever those needs are, and help them gain or maintain stable housing. Do you have anything to?
Madam Mayor?
I don't know if that clarifies enough for you, but
it does.
both.
Maybe just one step further then. Who ultimately decides that? So if if there's a student and they need more dollars for car repair or to get into a different type of housing, I mean, what are the steps to evaluate and decide, okay, we're going to give this student X amount of dollars more, and here's the reasons why?
So that currently goes to our board that also approves all of our applications. And so those requests go to the board and say, hey, here's the student situation, this is the need, this is what we're requesting, you know, an increase by $150 a month for 2 months, whatever, you know, whatever that might be for the student. And then the board comes back and either has questions, says yes, we meet, things like that. So,
Madam Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Kevner, in addition, there's the city approval process. This grant is a reimbursement grant, so any decisions that are made programmatically have to be run through us. So here we have staff members, we have 3 or 5 layers of review. So if there's something that the city sees that isn't justifiable, not that we would ever expect the school district to propose, let alone approve something that doesn't make sense, we do review it here before cutting a check or approving any kind of payment for anything like that. And I also want to remark to another question. Something that we've had experience with in the past with these kind of public service projects is that when private donors and other groups see public buy-in, even if it's just for a year, they're able to kind of use that as a fundraising tool to help leverage other funds that are out there. There are other groups in particular, Jesse Tree's an example, and I know they're not here to defend themselves. So I don't intend to speak for them, but they're one where they've been able to rally a lot of public support and private support across the valley because of the cities being able to put a little bit of money, a little bit of skin in the game for a small period of time. So I think this is a great opportunity that even if council decides that in future years that this isn't a program that they want to fund, or if the funding does disappear due to Councilmember Palmer's musings, it is something that I think that at least for this next program year is a great leveraging tool in their fundraising activities.
Thank you, Chris. Great, thank you very much.
any other questions?
No, but I met with the superintendent this week, and she said the best graduation speech that she heard was from a 21-year-old student who got her diploma this year. And she had not wanted to get a diploma. She was trying to get some transcripts so she could get her GED, and they made her come in to get those and convinced her that she should get her diploma. She changed tracks because of that action. By getting her diploma, she is now talking not about her job, but the career she wants to enter into. And because that she's gotten her diploma, she is now eligible for help in going on to college. So, you know, you do change lives. And what you're doing to help maybe get over that hump to get on the right path is very admirable. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, I stand for any final questions just in general. Otherwise, I would just remind you we have a public hearing on all of the projects next week where we'll entertain and consider any public comment there. And then the following meeting on the 24th, we'll kind of have a final wrap up of any revisions, comments, and seek your approval on the plan.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, Mr. Kavner.
Just a comment, Chris. I think this has been a very welcomed addition to the overall process related to this program. Being able to have applicants here speak to the project, be able to not have you have to necessarily be the translator and disseminate information back and forth, but for us to be able to engage them, I think it's been another great improvement into our program that we offer. I appreciate you for doing this.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing further on that, we'll go ahead and move on. Mr. Clerk, I did see that you touched base with our scouts, and maybe you can tell us what troops they are representing.
Absolutely, thank you, Madam Mayor. In the back row in the middle is represented Troop number 137. And then on the left in the back is represented Troop 164.
Thank you for joining us. We'll wish you luck on your merit badges. Thank you. Okay, item 6C is under Public Works Week Recap. Hard to set yourself up and speak at the same time, huh?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's my honor to share with you our 2018 Public Works Week recap. So the Public Works Week theme this year was the power of public works. We believe in the power of appreciation also. As we wrap up our 10th annual Public Works Week celebrations in Meridian, we wanted to take a moment to express our appreciation and gratitude to everyone who sponsored, participated, or helped with this week. First, I'd like to invite the Public Works Week Committee's members who are here to stand. I want to recognize them so that we can say thank you to them. Without them, we can't do anything. This is the group of individuals who tirelessly work behind the scenes to make each event happen along with their teams. Thank you. We also want to thank you, those who attended our tour. Not quite knowing what to expect or what they were going to learn, but they came anyway. They ended up enthused and amazed by how the city runs its utilities. This event is so popular, we're talking about expanding it in the future, possibly with the addition of a second bus. The wharf expansion capacity projects will be closer to completion next year, around that time, so please join us to see that. We also want to extend a special thanks to the mayor. She joined us on this year's tour, and we appreciated her presence. We can't forget to thank the many employees, sponsors, and community members who participated in making this year's expo a huge success, in spite of the rain. It didn't dampen spirits, and you could feel the excitement after the rain as much as you could before. We know that the expo was a success this year because we ran out of comments cards. That's a first for us. And we received high marks from all of the comment cards. As you can see on the screen, there are some of the comments we received. We appreciate also seeing several past and present council members at the expo this year. It's wonderful to have your support and to see everyone having fun as they learn about the city and Public Works. Now, thanks to Shandy Lynn, who created it, the long-awaited Public Works Week video. If you missed the fun or just want to experience it again, we invite you today to start planning to join us next year. We are always working on ways to make the events bigger and better. Such a great week of activities isn't possible on our own. Since this was our 10th year of celebrating Public Works Week in Meridian, we created some special sponsorship opportunities. So today, we want to recognize and thank Republic Services and Coastline Equipment for their generous platinum level sponsorship. We have plaques for each of them, and at this time I'd like to invite their representatives to join us and receive them. From Republic Services, we have Rochelle Klein. And from Coastline Equipment, we have Jason Seaver. And Austin Opog.
Thank you so much.
Our platinum sponsors donated $1,000 or more for our events. In addition to our platinum sponsors, we can't forget to include the many other contributors to Public Works Week. So in addition to these two sponsors, we had 13 gold, silver, or bronze sponsors. We had 20 other organizations who participated in various Public Works Week activities. And we had 27 organizations who donated prizes. Without the generous community members and partners like this, Public Works Week and the education events would not be possible without them. From them, we received a total of $11,790 in cash donations. The total cost for all events was $9,829.78. That amounts to less than 0.005 of the total Public Works Week budget. That's an amazing amount of money to do all the education that we do with this event. And we appreciate all of our donors. Because of their generosity, we're able to share with others in our community. So for the Parks Care Enough to Share Activity Scholarship Fund, they provide full or partial activity scholarships to children and families in Meridian. For example, $100 pays for a full year of preschool. It pays for one semester of martial arts or dance class. It pays for 2 weeks of camp, or it pays for 4 art classes. So for the Parks Department, we have $804.23 to help many of those children in our community. For the Meridian Community Recycling Fund, which is used for projects and programs that benefit the greater community while promoting responsible recycling, the amount that will be shared with them is $1,206 and $1,206.34. And finally, the Meridian Food Bank, who provides vital food resources to those in need to our local community. At this time, we'd like to invite Dan Clark, the representative, to come up and receive a check. And Mayor, would you like to join us? You ready?
Sure.
Drum roll. And the drum roll is, the check that we're presenting to the food bank today is $4,021.13.
Just to say.
Absolutely.
Right now, we're moving into the beginning of school. Actually, it's happened so quickly. And so we're preparing for our backpack program. And last year we gave out 19,454 backpacks. So when you look at this, at $4,000, backpacks cost just shy of $4 each. So that's, when you do the math, and that's what we need to do. And we just got to do it now, start now. So thank you. This will be a great help.
That's the generosity of our donors have allowed us to give over $6,000 back to our community. So we invite you to join us next year at Public Works Week. But ultimately, none of this would be possible without the support of our City Council and Mayor. We appreciate both your packing and your attendance at the events as we entertain and educate the residents about the importance and power of Public Works. Thank you. I'll stand for any questions.
Council, any questions? Certainly anyone who has been on the tour and participated in the Public Works Expo know how far those educational outreach has done. Anyone that I've talked to that has gone on this tour are blown away by the pride of the employees, the knowledge that they have, the condition of the facilities are outstanding, and they are reminded that it's not just that day, it's every day. That goes a long way. And those that participate in the expo and being exposed to the big equipment, what happens to people's waste is really interesting. I mean, you turn something that we say no news is good news, right, in the public works realm, but it builds understanding. And I think for future generations, I hope it's building a future workforce, that they see that technology plays a huge role in what we do in our Public Works Department, that they can see themselves as something that I want to contribute to our community through this as an area of career choice. So who would have ever thought that when this was started a number of years ago, that the benefits would continue to multiply? And I really do think they multiply over and over and over again. So to the Planning Committee, our heartfelt thanks. To the many staff hours that go out there and put such a positive face of our city to our citizens, showing their knowledge, their pride, and that this is a great city, and that we take pride in the service that we deliver, is priceless. So thank you to each and every one of you. This is a great week that shows not only the department, but the city very well. So thanks for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move into 7 under action items and start with 7A. I think that this is a follow-up from the presentation that we got from the Meridian Downtown Business Association. And Nick is here. He has an update for council in follow-up to some of the questions that were raised a couple of weeks ago when he was here. He has since been to the Parking Committee and MDC and has good news in form of an update. Hi, Nick.
Hi. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Nick Grove, business address 713 North Main Street. In front of you again today talking about closing out the project on Idaho Avenue that was started in 2015 with the MOA between the city and MDC, where there was the attempt to do a parklet feature on Idaho Avenue, and we're looking to close that out by adding in additional parking on the north side of Idaho Avenue by converting the parallel parking to diagonal parking on that side of the street. When we came before you last month, we spoke in generalities about the proposed numbers without having specific bids. Through the work of Caleb Hood with the city and Ashley Squires with MDC, we were able to get significantly lowered bids in, and with the contributions of the Meridian Downtown Business Association, which, as you all know, is still a young organization building its numbers and trying to get as much out of the numbers that we do have to improve our downtown for now and in the future. We come before you asking for up to $600 to add 6 to 8 parking spots on the north side of Idaho Avenue. The total cost of the project is estimated to be $2,100.
$2,100 or $2,110,
Yep,
is
there
that
we go.
right?
I forgot the 10. There's an extra one in there. And so with that, the MDC or MDBA would cover $1,000, which would take it down to $1,110, which would be jointly split between the city and MDC. MDC has agreed to fund this up to $600, and I'm asking the city today if they would be willing to agree to close out the end of the parklet project by adding the 6 to 8 additional parking spots with the up to $600 amount to cover the cost to do the engineering that is required by ACHD and the painting of the lines by another company to get the actual paint on the ground. The status of the street as it is right now has been fog sealed by ACHD over the last 2 weeks. And so if you walk over there now between Main Street and 2nd Street on Idaho Avenue, it is unpainted. So we would like to get going on this quickly so that there are striping lines on that portion of Idaho Avenue.
Thank you, Nick. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Milam.
not a question, but a comment. Nick, great job. You know, you came before us, you asked for amount of money that we felt was too much, we gave you direction. You guys followed up with that, and I feel like you're coming to here today with a number that's absolutely reasonable, and I'm happy to give you my vote.
Is that a motion?
Well, and if anybody had any other questions. Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
I move that we approve or provide up to $600, or not to exceed $600, to assist with this project and providing an extra 6 to 8 parking spots downtown Meridian.
Okay, I have a motion and a second discussion.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavanagh.
I wasn't here for that meeting, but I kind of want to echo Councilmember Milam's comments and really thank you, Nick, Caleb, and I understand Ashley did a great job of helping to negotiate a very favorable rate for us to be able to get this project done, so to thank her as well. It's awesome when all of our agencies work well together and the public benefits, so thank you.
And yeah, Ashley went out and utilized some relationships, and it was Civil Survey that really stepped up in a big way, a Meridian company, and we greatly appreciated that. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Clerk, would you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Kavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Nick.
Council.
Thank you. Well done.
I've never had that.
You know, that deserves applause. 7B is under our glass recycling update to council, and I'm going to turn this over to Dave Miles.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. So if you'll recall, it was about June 12th, council approved a resolution for an optional curbside residential glass recycling element to the glass recycling program that is underway. And you were asked to bring back an option for glass recycling for a drop site, which Republic Services has agreed to locate if council chooses at their transfer station. So today we're here to talk about that. I've got really one slide just to update and recap where we're at, essentially. As I said, the residential option is underway. I do understand that Republic's had calls on that and is ready to roll out their outreach element to that. However, they would like to tandem that information and the outreach component with any drop site option if that's what the council chooses. So they're a little bit in waiting for that, but ready to go, and hence today's conversation. So today for a drop site option, there's essentially three options that we could look at. As was presented to you before, the city could fund a drop site for approximately $1,700 a month. It's about $21,000 a year. Or have a user-funded drop site where the users pay $6 per drop at the site each time that they drop the glass materials. Or another option that council could consider is a ratepayer option, which would factor in about 6 cents a month to a ratepayers, which is about just under 0.5% increase in today's current rates at a 65-gallon cart, which is the size cart that the residential option is using. So essentially that's where the drop site option is today for glass recycling, and I'd leave it to council for discussion and any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dave. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, Dave, so is it as simple a math problem as that the determination has been that 289 people would pay $6 a month, or 289 people in a month would pay $6 to drop their glass off?
Republic Services is here as well, and Rochelle can probably answer their pricing. Essentially, Republic structured their pricing based on their needs. My understanding with the costs of the city-funded drop site, we have a breakdown that was presented previously showing cost for transfer loads onto the trailers at the site, rent of roll-off boxes, and a haul rate. I don't know how the $6 per customer drop rate was established, though. If you're willing to do that.
That's a good thing we got you here by presenting a plaque, right?
As a lost leader, right? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Rochelle Klein with Republic Services, 2130 West Franklin, here in Meridian. And Councilman Palmer, to answer your question, yes, we have some fixed costs that we have to recover. The glass cannot be delivered dirty or with rocks or anything in it, so we have to either build a cement bunker or house it in 8 roll-off boxes stored and then a ninth one available, so we always have one to swap out. So Momentum Recycling would come to collect the glass, and we had 8 full roll-off boxes. So the best we can estimate right now is that we would have at least 300 customers a month. It's more than likely we'd get that in a weekend. So it's a little dicey on our part to always guess a brand new program. We don't really know what the pent-up glass recycling want or need is here in Meridian. So until we build it, we won't really know. But right now we're figuring at least 300 people will use the drop site. And the drop site would allow up to 1 cubic yard, which is about 6 or 8 green bins of the old green totes. So we would make those available for people who wanted to store glass at home and then bring those, because they're very rigid. I don't know if you remember, did you use a green tote, a green bin at home? So we still have all those. We'd provide those to the West Ada School District for those schools, but we also save them for things like this, for projects. So it would be like 6 or 8 of those that people could bring in, and it would be $6 to drop off up to a cubic yard. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
Can I ask you one other question? Sorry. Yeah, yes. I made you walk all the way back. Regardless of the option we pick, is part of the idea built in that would allow that usage to be tracked on a number of individuals that drop off and volume. And so in a year from now, whichever path we pick, we might have some metrics that could help us pivot if necessary.
So Councilman Borton and Madam Mayor, the answer is that's up to you, because we envision this as being part of a drive-through drop site, so you wouldn't wait in the transfer station line. For us to collect metrics, they would have to actually come through and say, I'm a glass customer, and we're happy to do that, but people like to get in and get out. They like to swoop in, drop their cardboard, drop their cans, and get out. So we can do that. It's just a matter of having them go through the gate and check in, or just kind of, right now you can just veer off to the left and drop your materials. So it's really up to you guys, but we can give you overall glass volumes of how much glass we collect, but it would be more difficult for us to track if we didn't have them actually check in and say, I'm a glass drop-off customer.
Rochelle, how would you get people to actually get out of their car and put it in the bin? Because I do understand other drop-off sites have problems with people just setting it right in front of the canister, and that does become quite a mess.
It's very labor intensive. Madam Mayor, yes, one of our biggest issues with glass is people do like to get there quickly and drop off. They'll leave full boxes or bags of glass on the ground. That's why we would have it inside the gate. So it'd be available all day Saturday, and it'd be available from like 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we would close that at the end of the day, because right now, for example, in Eagle, the roll-off boxes, like construction boxes, have doors cut out on the side. So they're accessible for anybody, even if you're in a wheelchair, you can access the low glass doors. But that being said, you have to actually put it in. It's not a top load, so you can't just dump your whole box at once. You have to kind of thread 2 or 3 bottles at a time on the side, or you can hook your bin in and dump it. But it's more work than just setting it and abandoning it. So having a staffer there to keep an eye on it would help keep down the illegal dumping of glass. It's a huge problem if you talk to Eagle. They have an unattended site, and now they have cameras up everywhere because it became such a problem. So for us, we would just start right off the bat with having it during staffed hours when the transfer station's open.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Lil
I
Roberts.
can probably answer these.
Madam Mayor.
We call it strategic planning.
And whichever one of you would like to answer. So my question is if you do the $6 per person, then do they have to check in and check out so that that's collected? So it won't be as user-friendly and, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
So more math. So you've got about 29,000 ratepayers, right, in Meridian?
Actually, we have more than that.
Yeah, they're currently about 32,000 plus, about 32,300.
Okay, thanks.
And Madam Mayor and Councilman Palmer, I can tell you, we get calls on this all the time. I suspect that this will be a site that will be used heavily. We're not sure yet, but my guess is based on the number of calls we've been taking for years that this will be a site that's heavily used. So, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
I think to get the precise number of households, though, if Councilman Palmer's trying to do math, this is also open to commercial as well. They just are still limited to the same volume as a residential, right? So if we were looking at a per account, those numbers should include all commercial accounts as well as residential accounts. Do you know the total on that, Dave? Either one of you?
Well, my understanding was the drop site was available for residential only based on prior discussions, so.
And Madam Mayor and Councilwoman Milam, sorry. That would be again up to you. So if it's an open drop site for anybody to use, we do find that, for example, in the city of Eagle, we do get a lot of bars and restaurants that use that site because it's open and free to the public. So bars and restaurants that pack their glass over do use that site. So if it's open to the public, it would be, my guess is, used by everybody. If you have to check in and pay, it would be the $6 fee for each person through the gate.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Rochelle? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So council, in front of you are several different options, and we're hoping to get directions so we can work with our recycling partner.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
If it's the top option, a city-funded site, is that necessitate a budget amendment, or does it start next fiscal year?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Borton, my understanding is that that would start next fiscal year.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
I'm in the opinion that the city should fund this. I think that it's a small price to pay for the amount of waste we're going to keep out of the landfill. I also feel that if there's not a fee for a drop-off, it will be much more highly utilized. So that's where my vote is.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Thank you. And I don't know, Mayor, if you can answer this, or I don't know if Dave, if you know, did SWAC have a recommendation that they were making on this particular piece?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Kavner.
Options?
On the three options, no. SWAC was generally supportive of the GLASS program overall and wanted to have council input on the methodology.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Lowell Roberts.
Madam Mayor, I agree with Councilman Mylum that I think the city should fund it. I know the amount that we would save from going into the landfill is amazing, and I cannot believe the outreach that I've heard and had people comment and things, and they're so excited to see this, whether it's funded through taxes or we increase their rate. Everyone I've talked to has been willing to, I want to pay my share and make it as easy as possible and just have it done, have it easy, help everyone be able to, encourage everyone to be able to recycle their glass.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to. We nickel and dime our citizens to death. Whether it's option 1 or 3, they're paying for it. I would think at least start with the user-funded drop site version and gauge its success before we go ahead and just force everybody to pay for it. I mean, they're anticipating 300 users a month, but we're going to ask 30,000 ratepayers to chip in for it. If you want to get to that point, so be it, but let's try the user-funded first and gauge its success.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
I just don't think you can compare the two. If there's a $6 fee or if it's free, those numbers are going to be completely different. So you're gauging it on a fee base compared to a non-fee base. Those numbers aren't even comparable. So I don't think that that's a way to gauge it. Some people will still use it, but not near as many. And I would be okay with, and it's actually, really close to 5 cents per household or per account. So I would be okay doing it that way as well. But yeah, I'm not really in favor of the user funded. I don't think it'll be as successful of a program. And that's it.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
You can argue different angles on it. I'm supportive of kind of knocking people off center and encouraging the changing behavior with glass recycling, which is new to the community. So at the start, the city-funded drop site seems most appropriate. I think the benefits outweigh the costs doing it that way, and we can gather some data and see if it necessitates, in light of the amount of use, a citywide rate change for us all to collectively share that cost like we do so many other public works expenses. Or perhaps it's not nearly as popular as we think, and it might pivot to a user-funded. But to encourage changing behavior, I think the city-funded site's most appropriate.
And Madam Mayor, Councilman Borton, to your previous question, I know my director's in the audience, but I'm sure that we can figure out a way to collect some more accurate data between working with Republic and staff as well.
Madam Mayor.
Regardless.
Mr. Kavner.
I think just some added voices. I think it's important that we're all kind of sharing where we're at on this particular issue. I'm not one that gets excited about pilots. I always believe if we're going to do something we think is the best, we should jump in and do it. But in this particular situation, I almost see this as a little bit of a pilot. And recognizing the business challenges the Republic faces and trying to provide a convenience to let our citizens just drop off and get on with their day, which I think is the appropriate move, versus how do we really collect how many people are using it. And to me, I think a way that we could do that is potentially to collect the amount that we collect through our curbside program and weigh that against the drop-off program. In my mind, a year from now, is this council is contemplating raising the voluntary curbside glass pickup fee to incorporate the cost of offering the drop-off program. If you want to recycle glass, and many of our citizens said they have, great. So you can figure out a way to let's make sure that it pencils out so that a citizen who doesn't use any glass doesn't ever have to pay for that. So that's the direction I'm supportive of. That said, I've heard from a lot of our citizens who this is a service that they think is important to have in our community. I think that it's budget season, and I think we have all went through our budget books and have been able to find, the equivalent of 12 months worth of $1,734 that we could find that maybe isn't as mission critical as something that we think this from our citizens' perspective. So I'm supportive of the city-funded drop site as at least as a temporary measure. It may be something that I would support permanently, but I know that there will be a point in time where Republic will come before us to look at rates and what we're charging our citizens for the services that are important to our community. Having this as part of that discussion, to me, is something that we'll just need to include as well at that time. Okay. We got to get it going.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
whether we do it through a tax increase or a rate increase, I don't know. Maybe I'm just pointing out that point, that it's either a rate increase or it's a tax increase.
Not necessarily.
Because we couldn't currently budget it with what's been presented to us without a tax increase.
This is an enterprise fund expense, correct? Madam Mayor? I apologize. This is enterprise fund?
No.
No? General?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Board, it would be a general fund.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
And I mean, I think there's no tiptoeing around it. Councilmember Palmer's correct. If we do a city-funded or a ratepayer, Meridian citizens are going to pick up the dime one way or another. And it's just a matter of, is it more prudent to pass it on to the ratepayer citizen or to include it as part of our city general fund and move forward that way? I'm more comfortable with it being city-funded, again, as a temporary measure, because either way, our citizens who are our ratepayers are going to be paying for it one way or another. I see more as a sure, but
Well, so we will look for a motion to move forward on this.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylum.
I move that we approve the drop site location of Republic Services and as a city-funded drop site for the first year of this program, starting fiscal year 2019.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
just keep in mind when we do this, we're never going to go to either of these other two options or drop it. I will always, this council is always going to keep that on there, and it's only going to go up. We'll never
Well-
stop a risk glass recycling program.
I think the direction to the group that we've kind of pulled together to have the policy piece, bring recommendations back, if we can have a discussion put on next June's agenda, maybe the workshop, to have an overview of how the program has gone, and then council can have a discussion at that time as to the best way to fund it moving forward.
Madam Mayor, council members, that's absolutely, we could do that.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
And I agree. However, I think the only missing piece is if we're going to look at that at the same time that we look at public services rates as a whole, which would be the time to look at it, it doesn't match up timeline-wise with our budget. So maybe we need to looking at rate adjustments earlier in the year and after our budget is finalized.
Well, the idea is by having that conversation in June, it gives our finance department an opportunity. We close out our 2019 budget at the end of September, and Republic comes in September with their rate information. So it actually could work well in knowing if it's a general fund expense, if it's going to be wrapped up into the rates, or if it's pulled out of the budget completely and a user-funded drop site. Those conversations can be held enough in advance so that that planning to get it moving has a chance to roll out.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
You lost me. Isn't that the decision we're making this moment? As to which style it is, not that somebody's going to come talk to us in September and say, maybe do it a different way?
September of 2019.
Okay, so this...
So this would be, the motion as stated is to have a city-funded drop site. And the conversation has been to then bring back this item for next June for that funding discussion after we have some experience with it at first.
Madam Mayor, so then the decision right now is to put it into 2018's budget.
19, 1 year.
So we won't even start this until October 19. What I meant was 19's budget, October this year.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes. Madam Mayor, it would start October 1, 2018 for fiscal year 19. You'd have about 8 months worth of data by the time you come back in June, or 9 months worth of data to be able to have the same conversation to say, should we keep it in the general fund or should we look at what it looks like on the rate side?
Gotcha.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
I guess if Republic Services wanted to build it sooner and just not charge us till October, that would be okay too.
You don't have to respond. Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
No.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave.
Okay, 7C is an update and an MOU with the City of Boise on the Orange Bag Recycling Program, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Neri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is the agreement to get engaged with the City of Boise's program on the Orange Bag. It has been reviewed by my office. We are comfortable with the council approving this agreement. It's a 2-year agreement with only a 1-year commitment of the purchase of the bags. So it's an annual funding requirement if you want to continue with that. Again, again, as it's kicking off, we anticipate, and the City of Boise anticipates this program extending into the future, but this is only a 1-year financial commitment. The funds for this, I think, were recommended from the Community Recycling Fund to fund the first 1,500 bags that are what this agreement contemplates. And again, there's a cancellation without cause condition or clause in the contract. So if for some reason the council decides after this first 1,500 purchase to not continue with this, we can simply cancel the agreement. And again, if you wish to fund it next year, you can do that.
Thank you, council. Any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Borton.
brief recall is the source of funds for this year's purchase of the bags comes from community recycling?
Yes, sir. Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
Well, since they're related topics, more, I guess a question kind of on the last one. So did we just commit that spending for that budget, or did we add it to the discussion for public comment? Because we haven't set that budget. Or did we just bypass the public and put it in the budget?
You put it in the budget that you will later vote on.
Okay, so it's still up for discussion and public comment could still be removed, but we've added it to the binder essentially. Okay.
Well, Madam Mayor, so the community recycling fund is a dedicated fund that's already there.
I went backwards.
No, he went
Oh.
back to the previous.
Oh, the previous one. Okay, I
Yeah.
apologize. Sorry.
So now we're back on topic. Okay, any questions to the Orange Bag Program?
Do we need a motion? Yeah, I guess we do. Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
I move that we approve the MOU with the City of Boise on the Orange Bag Recycling Program.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. I guess maybe after the vote, we'll see if we can get an update as to what this all looks like, right? Okay. There's no further discussion. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes. And I guess Dave can give us an update on where it is, logistics, and what the process looks like at this point.
What's it all mean?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, essentially where we're at now is the MOU will go back to Boise. They'll put it into their queue for approval as well. I understand they do have bags, the 1,500 bags on account in their inventory with the manufacturer. So we have to find out how long it would take between the time that Boise approves the MOU and the bags could actually be delivered. In the interim, we've been working with staff to have a database ready to go for registration. We'd also want to do at least a month's worth of outreach to tell people how to register because it is 1,500 bags. So we want to be fair to everybody. We anticipate 2 cycles of utility bill mailers to explain how to register so that everybody has the same information. We'll also utilize social media, news outreach, press releases, things of that nature. And then once that occurs, there'll be about what we have previously anticipated is about a 2-week registration period where they can actually go on, sign up for the bags. And then from that period, there'll be another transitional period where people actually come and pick up the bags. Once they pick them up, they're free to use them. But we anticipate probably about a 2-week period where people who signed up and got approved can then use them and come pick them up. Additionally, we'll be talking with Boise about the data collection process that they go through so that we understand what pieces of information they want when the material is going back and forth between the two. So essentially, we don't have a current updated timeline. It's predicated on Boise approving it, but it's probably about a month and a half to 2 months before actual use, provided the bags get delivered in time for that. But we can certainly provide an update as we get more of those details.
Dave, how do they tell who has the contaminated orange bags? We won't be charged for extra costs because of contamination, would we?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is a component of the agreement, provided that we work together with Boise to determine exactly that. And that was one of our primary questions, was that we don't want to be charged for contamination. Boise has indicated that their partners won't be charged. City of Eagle, City of Garden City have entered into the same agreements, and they're just working through essentially understanding that there won't be charges for that. Boise is progressing through that conversation with their supplier and their manufacturer, and Renewalogy, who's the third party end game to this that produces the fuel out of these plastics.
Awesome. Okay. Any other questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Not necessarily just about the orange bag, but just maybe getting some better understanding. I think we've, as a body, have talked a lot about having a broad-based discussion about what recycling looks like in Meridian a year from now, or 3 years, or 5 years from now. There's been so many moving parts, and even as a city council member wearing my citizen hat, I don't have a lot of strong confidence that I could speak to what our program's gonna look like a year from now. And so I know that there are still some conversations that are happening in SWAC, but really just expediting that, because I think that our delay in taking some action, at least being able to share with our citizens, this is our plan, this is our vision, is doing a detriment to our citizens and to ourselves as a body. So I don't know if that's scheduled for the future. Being able to know when that is would be helpful, and letting us know kind of what all is going to be discussed, so that I think that's a meeting that we as council will need to do a significant amount of homework for, to be really prepared to make some recommendations and some decisions.
Sure. Madam Mayor, Councilman Kavner, thank you for your comments. I think you've hit the nail on the head in that there have been a lot of moving pieces to this very rapidly. I can share that staff has been working on several fronts. One, in terms of how the whole program in solid waste looks and how it gets managed with the City of Meridian, and what the messaging is and how the outreach works and who controls that and who messages that. Additionally, we have the subject from Republic Services, who's requested a fee increase related to recycling. We anticipate having that fee discussion, the Republic Services fee discussion, prepared for SWAC by the end of this month, hopefully, with the hope to go to council shortly thereafter. And then following that, we would hope to have the sort of global staff conversation about how do we handle solid waste in Meridian from a staff perspective. And then from that point, I think we'd be primed and ready for a fiscal year 19 kind of rollout to say, conversationally, how do we think this should look, and how do we think it plays out, and how do we move forward? Does that answer your question?
Madam Mayor and Dave or Joe, is this a September then kind of timeframe that we would have that? I guess I'm one that if we're proposing new program services and costs associated with that, wanting to have public hearings or neighborhood meetings on that, really wanting to make sure that we're doing a really great job as the city to connecting with our citizens to get their impact. Because as you could see with the conversation about glass, I think all of us spoke in one form or another, and I think all feel like that we're representing a certain segment of the community that feels that way. And so I know whatever we do, there's going to be people that are going to be really excited about that, and people who aren't going to be excited about it. So keeping us in the loop as to what that timetable looks like. Again, if it's a workshop kind of overlay presentation in September, followed by, again, a plan for, again, public hearings or neighborhood meetings, those are the things that, can you catch us up to date? Is that the plan, or maybe just drill down a little bit deeper what some of those
Sure.
specifics are, if they've been decided?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Kavner, you're on track, yes. I think there's two perspectives going on. One, you'll see the Republic Service request for the fee increase fall in line with their standard rate request process. So that will be sort of moving along on one track. On the other track, in terms of how Meridian is handling its solid waste program and how it's getting managed, I'd commit that staff will be ready to have the conversation sometime August thereon, and then leave it to council and the mayor to decide when you actually want to hear it, whether that's September or during August or somewhere thereafter.
I think it's probably best to have at the next workshop, the overview and kind of lay out the calendar ahead. So if there's any change, you have it as part of that rate discussion as well. So you can kick it off in August and have a lot of the public hearing and noticing aspects in September.
Great. We got a plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, item 7D is a budget amendment under legal. Mr. Neri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So annually, we have a budget line item in the legal department budget for outside legal services. Annually, it's for both anticipated expenses as well as unanticipated expenses throughout the year. This year, our request is for an additional $70,000 in funding. A majority of that, and I don't have the breakdown, and I apologize, here has already been expended. So this is money that was predominantly, if you look at the amendment that's provided, was money that went for both the courthouse case, which this should be the last year we will have to request any funding for that, and then also an arbitration that was anticipated going into the fiscal year, but the costs and impacts of that, some have been expended so far and some are still to be expended in wrapping that up. So, and then there's one other expense that's partially anticipated. We have received one billing in relation to outside counsel on a specific tort claim. But anyway, those are the various activities that this fee has covered this year in both, like I said, anticipated, and then the tort claim was an unanticipated expense. If you have any questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, we'd ask for your approval.
Okay, council, any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
I move that we approve a budget amendment and not to exceed amount of $70,000 for legal services.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If there's no discussion, Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes. Okay, our next item is under our Parks and Recreation Department. I see Mike making his way up here.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to bring forward this budget amendment. We're requesting a budget amendment of $612,000 to fund some additional amenities of Phase 1 in the new Discovery Park in South Meridian. These, this budget request and these amenities were brought forward during the regular budget process a few weeks ago, and there was some discussion at that time that due to some potential cost savings of doing them concurrently with the construction that's happening right now, that that it might be a worthwhile conversation to bring these back as a budget amendment. This would fund 2 picnic shelters, a 20 by 20 shelter and a 20 by 30 picnic shelter, an off-leash dog area, some asphalt trails, asphalt and gravel trails, and then also some more educational items in the splash pad. So these amenities would be funded 100% with impact fees. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions from council? Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Burnt.
I move that we approve Parks and Recreation Department's budget amendment not to exceed $612,000 for the Discovery Park Phase 1 amenities.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Item 7F is under our, finance. Oh my gosh, finance has a budget amendment. Just want to call that to your attention.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for pointing that out. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm here to stand for any questions regarding the budget amendment that we have proposed to you in the amount of $55,810. This is our request to hire a consultant to conduct our impact fee study. By state statute, we are required to do this every 5 years. So this is to hire a consultant to conduct a study on our behalf. And then later this fiscal year, we will present to you the findings and an impact fee rate proposal. So again, stand for any questions on this particular budget request.
Council, any questions? Now is your chance. Okay, hearing none. Mr.
There are
Borton.
no questions. I would move we approve the budget amendment for the impact fee study update in amount not to exceed $55,810.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Sorry. Yeah, okay, I'll have-
And then item G pertains to the same item.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, correct that the next item is the actual contract that we would like to have you approve based on the budget amendment that we just approved, so we can begin working on a schedule to have the consultant conduct the impact fee study for us for this project request. So we stand for any questions on the contract.
Any questions? Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
if there are no questions, I'd move to approve the award of bid and the agreement to Raftalis Financial
We're almost done.
in a not-to-exceed amount of $55,810.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
Okay, now you can go sit down.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, item 8A is under department reports for our community development monthly update. On building services. Thank you.
Sorry.
I take it that's not showing up.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's a really good presentation. Just for the sake of time, Madam Mayor and members of the council, we'll go ahead and get rolling with the presentation. I think the verbal will be sufficient. The presentation was really just cues for the commentary and the update. So with that, we'll start. It's very much the same format that we've provided to you in the past. We are moving forward with the evolution plan and feel like things are moving forward well. We're going to start with the building services community development portion of this first. We've got actually this is not working either. It's not even let me move my own computer here. Here we go. Okay. So I wanted to kick it off first with the community development piece of this, the building services piece. We have, as you know, RFQs out to various contractors. We have received responses for those and graded those, and now we're in the process of getting master agreements in place for each of those for those services. This is, as you recall, is our backup plan, really is the means by which we'll weather the storm of the interim portion of this so that we can make sure we can maintain a a reasonable level of service as we get up and running with our own program. I think it's important to note here as well that we did receive a notice letter from DBS on, let's see, it was on Friday, noticing us that they will be terminating our mechanical services contract as well, effective December 30th. And so we will, in light of that, we will be adding an RFQ out to the market as well for those services. So we're just want you to be aware of that termination as well. We have had ongoing conversations with DBS to kind of get on the same page with what this transition will look like and how it'll work. They've put together a proposed transition plan. We've had conversation with them on what exactly that is and how it'll work. I think it's important to note that it is definitely a transition. It's basically a scaling down of their services in anticipation of us ramping up. That timeline is aggressive. So I think all of pressures that we were already feeling are a little bit more acute, and certainly the Plan Bs are more and more in focus as we move forward. The one item that I think is just important is just the time element. There's essentially a waning of the DBS services through the end of August, so it's a little bit quicker than we had anticipated. So that's the update on the community development side. Financing and finance and purchasing. You may have seen in the back parking lot we have 4 Chevy Equinoxes out there that are newly purchased. We just this week have gotten those over to the shop to get them decaled and equipped, and so we'll have fully loaded inspection vehicles here in the next 2 weeks. So we're excited about that. And if you could see it, there's some photos of those, but those are for my eyes only, I guess. IT, so just real quickly, all of the hardware that we have ordered has been received. We are holding on a TV as well as a copier until the TI is at a point where we can receive that equipment. But for the most part, the hardware is here, so we're ready on the equipment end. As far as oh, sure. Maybe it's my computer. Give it one more go.
Bingo.
Good job.
Good job. Thanks, everybody. So here's a good view of the cars. Excited about that. Just mentioned the hardware, and then onto the software. So this is the big implementation that we're undertaking. We have the agreements with Excella for additional licenses in place, and we're working with them to get the inspector piece of that installed as well. As far as Project Docs goes, we're grateful to the IT department for their efforts here, as well as our internal staff. We've had a number of on-site meetings with the Project Docs team, the Evolve team, to really start tipping up this program. So they're through essentially their first round of implementation and configuration, and now they're working into the integrating that with our Excella platform, the public access platform. And so that's coming along well. We're anticipating a September 7 launch date of that. And it's important to note that this is just the building portion, so other functionality will come later. But we're gunning hard for having the building piece in place September 7th there. But again, I can't kudos enough the IT team and as well as our own team for really kind of stepping up and getting everything that they need to over to Evolve so the process and the configuration just keeps moving forward. So we're really excited about that and appreciate all the hard work there. HR, have some good news here. We have our first ever City of Meridian building inspector hired. He started on Monday, John Shine. And so we're really excited to have John with us. He's doing training with Sam. He's going to do some observation with George from DBS. And we're getting him really integrated in our culture and how we want to do building inspections. So we're excited to have him here. We also have extended offers, and they have been accepted for our building inspection supervisor position as well as another inspector one position in the building department. So we're excited for that, and the start date of July 23rd there with those folks. So we're encouraged by that. I think, it's kind of the ongoing discussion that we had last month about hiring, and so look forward to further discussions with you all on how to expand the pool and hook and land good quality folks that we need to make this successful. As far as the tenant improvement goes, kudos to Max, Bill, and John, and the Public Works team there. They're fantastic. We get the weekly updates from them, and just they're rocking. So can't thank them enough. So just real quickly, we're pretty much done with the production room transition. The inspector room is very close. We'll show you a few photos here, and then kind of doing this in priority order as well. The plan review room up on the second floor is in a state of framing right now. So here's a few of the photos here. See, there's the mini split, the inspection area. Here's the production area. Actually, that's further along even than what you're seeing there. And then the upstairs second floor plan review area is getting framed out. So with that, that's the update of the building division, and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
Not a question, I'm just constantly in awe of how dedicated you guys are to making sure that this works. You're working way more hours than I would be willing to for this. So thank you for sticking around and staying up late and figuring out how to make this happen. Failure isn't really an option, so you guys are making sure that we don't have to.
I would also say that translates into our other departments as well, and Public Works and trying to get the parking lot done, and now the TI work done, and all of that is
HR as well, huge.
HR, finance. It's really been multi-department in trying to make all of this work. So kudos to everyone that's keeping this rolling forward.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you.
Okay. There's nothing further. We will move to item 8B, which is also community development, a report on overall development and growth. And that is the Caleb Show.
Yes, Caleb can come on up and join me. Just wanted to kick this off. I really have appreciated the dialogue that's gone on around this. I think it's the right thing to be talking about, specifically to our community. How do we best serve our community and get you all as the decision makers of the administration of our community the right information to make informed decisions. So with that in mind, I'll turn it to Caleb, and yeah, just really appreciate the open dialogue here.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thanks, Cameron. Madam Mayor, members of the council, you're in luck. I'm battling a virus, so probably not going to talk a lot for fear of breaking out into a coughing fit. So want some feedback, though, from all of you. No, thank you. I've got some. But I do want some feedback and do need to get a few things out here so we can have a dialogue, but hopefully you can, this is engaging enough and you can provide some feedback. I did provide a memo for today's meeting, should be in the packet hopefully, dated July 3. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that are in there as we kind of run through a proposal to update the staff report format. So to improve, as Cameron stated, improve staff reporting on proposed development applications, we've been discussing one tool being to improve the written staff report. So again, included in the packet is a draft. It's not a fully developed staff report. A lot of the sections would remain the same towards the third, fourth, fifth page and so on. But we're really trying to get some of the most important critical information front and center. I know some of our reports can run long sometimes, 40, 50-page reports. So in the first couple of pages, hit everybody with the most important stuff first. And so that's kind of what the idea was in improving the written staff report. In addition to that, what we're talking about doing is improving the coordination, both internally with other departments, but also externally with other agencies to get their information. So that can also be included in the staff report. Again, a lot of that information front and center in the report, but then more analysis kind of throughout the report as well. So again, we've got a draft template. Want to hear your comments maybe as we look at that a little bit further here. The idea, though, again, is to present you all, the decision makers, with a better tool, so you have all the information available to make the informed decision. So that's the idea. However, it will take more resources to provide the analysis and information within the report. So I do want to disclose that a little bit more, particularly. I will look at police and fire. It'll probably be a little bit more work on their end, public works probably to some degree as well, to get the information in the report. They currently don't have staff. There's staff dedicated to providing some comments, but maybe not to the level that you all are looking for going forward. And that's kind of, again, why we're here, is to understand, get some direction from council on what type of information do you want reported in a staff report so you can understand levels of service and impacts to those levels of service over time comprehensively. So again, that's kind of the context for this discussion. So I have, a couple weeks ago, went to a director's meeting, discussed that with everybody, seemed to be on board, understanding and realizing, though, that it will take some resources, either have to be diverted from existing projects that they're working on to work on staff reports, or there may be a request in the future for additional resources to help perform some of that analysis from the various departments. So shared the draft staff report with them as well. Have had a couple of conversations, again, with police and fire via email on some tweaks to the staff report, but it's largely what you see in the packet is largely what we have to date. Maybe a couple of other things to highlight in the staff in the revised format is some additional graphics, some more maps up front. Hear you guys talking a lot about during these meetings about comprehensive impacts or projects within a general vicinity that have been approved recently that don't show up on a map. Maybe the ordinance hasn't been done yet, so it's not in GIS yet, and you don't actually see a city zoning there. But, oh yeah, 3 months ago, we approved a project that had another 400 units right there. So we're going to have a map that will show preliminary platted lots and otherwise approved developments, as a little inset. So, again, gives you kind of an idea of how hot an area is or other projects that have been approved in the general vicinity of the project that's before you at that point in time. Also, what we're proposing probably at the back as an exhibit is a phasing plan or phasing map to show what the applicant's proposing. Some of the dialogue that's been had previously has been about the sheer volume of units coming online all at one time, or the number of lots that are platted in any one given year or a season. And so showing everyone what the developer's phasing plan is for a project. Is it all going to be, is it a 100-lot subdivision all going to be done in one phase? Is it 3 phases? We can take that a step further if you'd like, and this is something we need to explore a little bit more. We get that information now, and we review it, and we typically hold them to the phasing plan. But what we haven't historically done is hold them to a timeline for that phasing plan. Maybe 3 phases, but if the market's hot, they may do all 3 phases in 1 year. We potentially could say you get 1 phase per year, just as an example, right? So there are some things like that you could limit a project to say, this is my proposed phasing plan. I've got a 300-lot subdivision. I got 10 phases. Typically, a developer doesn't say, you know, oh, it's going to be 10 years, but you don't really know, right? But if the concern is, again, too many coming on too quickly, we could say, you know what, we think we only have the capacity to handle X amount per year or per month or whatever, however we want to do that. So, but anyways, what we'll put in the report is their proposed phasing plan. So you'll know at least where it would break, and ask some questions potentially about when do you anticipate these units coming online, and if there's concerns about too much at any one time, we could potentially condition that accordingly. Again, the analysis section we envision being beefed up quite a bit. Really, the way I've explained it to others is we're going to tell you the information, you know, quickly in these tables. We're going to give you more details about what we told you in the table, and then we're going to tell you what we told you in the conditions. So really, you get it 3 times. You get a summary, go to this page. You want to know why the conditions? Read the analysis on why. But then there'll be a condition at the back that says, okay, how do we mitigate something that you told us why in the analysis? Here's really what you need to do. We need an additional fire station or whatever a potential mitigation measure might be. But that analysis section is not going to be just planning specific anymore. We envision it being, again, any agency or department that has some analysis that they want to put in there that explains a condition of approval within that section of the report. One of the other things that has been discussed is, and this is where we need some feedback again, is staff recommendation. We could potentially have a staff report that is just the facts. Code compliant, not code compliant. There would still be some analysis on those aspects and the comprehensive plan. But right now, you all have seen them. Right now, usually it's at the bottom of the first page. Sometimes it bleeds on the second page. Staff recommends, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends A, approval, B, continuation, or 3, denial. And it goes on to state, considering all applicant staff comments, blah, 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 right? We would remove that potentially from the staff report and just state, this application complies with the the minimums of code. Again, we do the analysis saying, you know, they have 15% open space and 3 tot lots and 2 swimming pools, and so you know what they are still. It complies with code. I mean, we wouldn't simply say it complies with code. We would still do the analysis and say this is how it complies with code. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't say this is a good project or not a good project. We would just say it complies with code or it doesn't comply with code, and kind of leave it at that. So again, I'd ask you to think about that a little bit. As you're thinking about that, I see some pros and cons to that. One of the cons that I'll just throw out there, I think, is maybe from the development community side as well as staff side, that it is something usually where there is some behind the scenes stuff that you all usually don't see, where we're negotiating or working with, you know, hey, can you do this? You know, this seems to make the project better. May or may not be explicitly in code, but it's something we think, this makes the project, we think this fits good with kind of what you got going on. Well, now if it's all just in code, we as staff lose any real negotiating power. On the other side of that, the applicant generally likes to go into a hearing with some certainty, if you will, from staff, a recommendation of approval, if you will. They like to have that going in, not a, well, here's a report, good luck, you'll see how it goes, and then leave it to the Planning and Zoning Commission or City Council to ultimately make the decision. They like to have staff's recommendation of approval going into a project. So again, some pros and cons to that concept, but I think it'll take a little bit of getting used to if we do decide to go that way as far as a staff recommendation. But makes a lot of sense too to just really keep it to the minimums. I will also point out, if we go to just code compliant type of analysis in a staff report, we do need to look at some of our minimums. I would, and we are, by the way. Some of the things we talked about in May at the workshop, we had Bill Parsons organized a UDC work group last month. So we had our first meeting and shared with them some of the changes that we potentially talked about as a group in May and are moving forward with those. So raising the bar on development if we're just going to say complies with code or not. So that's kind of moving forward. There may be some additional sections of code, though, we want to look at if we're just going to be complies, not complies type of a staff report. So as we move forward, again, I want to just check in and make sure you support this increased level of effort, you know, kind of citywide or throughout the departments, as well as a kind of a side point on that. We've had two other related topics come up. One is the timeline to process applications. So an application is submitted, the time to get it to a hearing, produce a staff report. A lot of times we don't have all the information we need, particularly at the Planning and Zoning Commission. We try to have all that information ready for you all because we want you to have everything available to make that decision. But a lot of times the Planning and Zoning Commission does not have an AC, not a lot of times. Sometimes the Planning and Zoning Commission does not have ACHD's staff report or a recommendation from their commission. And they're left taking the brunt of the public's angst from this project because it hasn't been through ACHD yet, so you get a lot of people coming to Planning and Zoning and wanting to talk about traffic, and the Planning and Zoning Commissioners are like, we aren't transportation engineers, I don't know. So talking potentially about not scheduling applications until we hear back from ACHD on their compliance with their policy on projects would create, for some projects, would create a longer time frame for approval than what they're used to. But that's something at least that's been talked about. The other again related topic is in our code. It's UDC 11-5A 6G5. There's two timelines that are called out. One is 70 days, and one is 45 days. The Planning and Zoning Commission has 45 days to forward on a recommendation to you all after they have all the information they need to forward on a recommendation. The 70 days is for you all to put forth a final decision on projects. So just a conversation about that, again, is 40. The legal department did some research on Idaho code. Does not appear that there's any statute in Idaho code where the 45 days comes up. What it does say is processed in a timely manner, and the commission shall have a reasonable time fixed by the governing board to examine applications. So I don't recall where 45 days came from, but it is just an option, again, to allow, as we've talked about, additional comments, all comments to be gathered and produce. I will just let you know, we pride ourselves on being prompt. We're not trying to delay anything, but sometimes we can get so fast that we miss stuff. And we miss other comments from other agencies, and it's through the process, and then we get a letter from DEQ saying, hey, we got this concern. A lot of other cities have a more elongated process, and I'm not proposing that necessarily, but if, again, the idea is you all need all the information to make an informed decision about if a project is appropriate for our community or not, you may need to allow some more time to give all those agencies and internal departments some more time to respond. So again, I think I'm done there because my throat is starting to scratch and I'm through my notes. But so it's draft. I'd like to get that feedback, come back to you with any comments that you all have, with any more comments that internal departments have to clean up exactly how they'd like the tables to read, work on some standard conditions with them. Maybe come back later this month with a more polished version of this for some more comments before we roll it out.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, Caleb, I like it all. On 2B under community metrics, I think under the section for distance to fire station, I would say go ahead and assume Station 6 exists when filling that section in for any projects coming forward. And then maybe a question on the distance to police station, including estimated police response time. I think that it's a little different than fire in that thank goodness the fire truck's not out patrolling. But I don't know if there's a way to kind of have a metric of guessing an estimated response time to a particular place in the city, or what maybe our police representative tonight has an opinion on what would be useful information to us with regard to a project that might go up.
Working? Over down? There we go. Yeah, that's a little different for us in regards to how we staff our police officers. We already track types of calls we have, locations that we have them, and we divide the city into beat areas. And we're constantly looking at that. We're now reevaluating going from a 2-beat area to a 3-beat area to allocate those resources based off the types of calls, the time of day. You know, as the calls during the day are different than the calls at night and require different types of staffing. So in looking at this project, I think we already do a really good job of tracking types of crimes, our response to those crimes, where they're located within the city. And talking with Lieutenant Coliani, we need to take the land use and residential zoning map and overlay it with our crime map perhaps, and look at that relationship there a little bit and see if that can give us a little bit of insight into the types of calls based off the residential area, commercial areas. You know, our NIBRS coding that we report to the federal government already breaks down location types. It's a business, it's a park, it's a residential area. But how does that relate to our density maps? And I think that would give us a little more insight into that. Response times by themselves probably isn't going to be the best factor to look at in regards to a new development coming in. Also, new developments change for needs for us. You know, as a residential neighborhood is starting, it's construction thefts, it's crimes of opportunities. As that neighborhood matures and people move into there, those crimes go away for a while, and then it may go where we don't have anything that's going on relatively there in a new neighborhood. And then we start getting the other types of crimes, persons crimes, you know, the domestic type situations, disturbing the peace, vandalisms. So the types of crimes then will change as that neighborhood develops and matures, just like in a commercial area as well. Does that hopefully answer your question?
Yeah, I think that Lieutenant Coliani has been part of some of the discussion more in environmental design. The police has met with planning to say, what is that relevant information that the police department can supply to council that would be able to clearly denote an expanding service area that now they're stretched an extra half mile, or and that's where the phasing plan would make a difference. If they're phasing from the outside in, not as good as from the inside out, but in police, the minute you annex that land, they serve that area and the surrounding roads. So how can they articulate impact on resources? I don't know if this necessarily captures it, but just trying to set what could some of those potential data points be that would mean something to you. And so this is really to initiate a thought process to say, yeah, what information would be important for me to know in order to make a well-informed decision. So if you can think of those things that you think, oh, if only I would have known, those are some of the things that we're interested in, so we can put it in this report to give value to the decision makers.
Madam Mayor?
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe with regard to the police, maybe just put in police comment. Then that way, if there's something that the police department recognizes as a particular different kind of situation that there might pose a problem for them or anything, whether it's, you know, we're going to build on the other side of McDermott and then the nearest overpass is going to be 1.5 miles. So if you're going to build this subdivision right here in the middle between these two overpasses, it's going to make a response time maybe 5 minutes longer than it might have been if we didn't have a freeway between it, if it was a subdivision, right? A normal type situation, I don't know, whatever it might be. So maybe just please comment in case they have one about something odd.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, we certainly envision kind of an other or a miscellaneous section where anyone could add, you know, some comments that maybe don't fit in the template per se, but an opportunity to provide those. I mentioned kind of in the middle of my presentation, hearing from both police and fire. Lieutenant Coliani did send me some comments just earlier this morning, but I didn't update the template to reflect his comments, and I don't think they're quite there yet, but just kind of along the same lines of what potentially they could report on. He says they're working on some high-level data and metrics that they could provide, things such as expected average police response times, both emergency and non-emergency, to serve the proposed development. In addition, we could show that the current calls for service are for the particular area being reviewed and vehicle collisions for that area in the last year. So just some examples about, you know, again, how often they're being dispatched or called to that area today, and maybe can forecast that in the future with this project, maybe with some of the things Lieutenant Leslie said about, you know, looking at some of the community metrics and what they can expect for crime and stuff. The other thing
could that also maybe play into, you know, it could be safety lighting in the roads that the development could put in to make that
absolutely
more.
So Madam Mayor, you mentioned that. I mean, that is Scott's job right now. Currently, that is the CEPTED community. It's like crime prevention through environmental design. I don't know why the P. Community, yeah, it's crime prevention through environmental design. So yeah, not putting a row of shrubs around an ATM machine, right? Because someone can be on the other side. And anyways, things like that. That's currently what he's looking for. Or putting lighting on pathways, those types of things. This is different. This is response times, level of service type of things, not just design type of things. So yeah, that's kind of the shift in need historically, and same with fire. The fire marshals typically commented on, hey, this cul-de-sac needs to have a radius of 28 and 48 so our trucks can turn around, not, hey, it's going to be 10 minutes before we get there. So it's a shift in the types of things. We'll still report out on those first things that we've historically done, but also report out on that. I guess the Councilman Palmer's point about Fire Station 6, the way I envision that happening, you know, reporting out is today, here's where we're at. Nearest station is 5. But in the analysis section, in the CIP, we have a fire station plan in 2020. And look at their phasing plan. Their first phase isn't planned until 2020, right, when this is supposed to come. So we can do some of that. We can say, hey, today, this is what it is, but we're planning on building one in 2 or 3 years, and that corresponds with their phase 2, which is about when we need it type. So that's kind of the idea, that we would provide all the information. Because, yeah, it really doesn't matter what it is right now, because even if you approve it today, they're not building it today. There's still a process to get there, right? So that's kind of where we're going with some of this, too.
And just also probably important to note that each department will assume their responsibility to providing those comments to planning. Planning's not going to be the police on it. Each department needs to bring that to the developments. So if you see an empty spot and you have questions, why don't I see comments from the police or fire? They're going to be sitting over there and they will be put on the spot.
Madam Mayor, if I can just prod again.
I just wanted to ease the mind.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You and your staff.
Yeah, we do appreciate that. So again, today, maybe any initial feedback, if you have it, on a couple of things. Staff recommendation would be one. Maybe initial thoughts on that. If you think we should go more towards a, hey, this complies with code or not, subjective, objective type of thing. Looking at some of the timelines and the review process, and potentially, again, waiting to schedule some of these projects until we have ACHD's comments in hand for certain types of projects. those are probably, and again, just a confirmation that more effort's going to be putting into the staff report on multiple fronts, because you want that information. You find it valuable to make decisions at the end of the day. So that's kind of the.
Mr. Burt?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Caleb, thank you for being here this evening. I can tell you are a little bit sick, so I appreciate it, man. You're struggling, drinking that cowboy water of yours, and hope you're feeling better. Quick question, though, or maybe a comment. I remember when I was previously on planning and zoning, and when these applications were first, presented, it was always really difficult to understand what the traffic issues were, because a lot of the times we didn't have, I wouldn't say I would say a lot of the time, we didn't have, information from ACHD or ITD or other stakeholders. And so I think it is vital and super important to have that information from stakeholders, neighboring stakeholders, so that, planning and zoning and then ourselves can make some better decisions, more prudent decisions, I believe. With that said, I don't want to, I don't want to hold up the process too long. My business, my day job has to do with the building industry, and so I get their concerns. They don't want to sit and wait and wait and wait and wait. And so maybe we can find a happy medium, or have more dialogue in regard to that. But it would definitely help, for sure. In one of those institutions might be, getting needed information from West Ada School District as well. What's the school situation looking like in that area? If there's a school nearby that's completely full. We had an application recently where we found out that people were actually taking their kids to another elementary school because the elementary school in which they would go to was completely full and they couldn't accept them anymore. Well, why are we building more units in that, especially high-density units, in order to cause more problems, not only for that school, but other schools as well? And so just a lot of different conversations that I think are necessary to make important decisions without holding up the process too long. So.
Well, I think that if we have a clear instruction that, and I can tell you that having Planning and Zoning Commission make a decision without all the information is not right either. And in order for staff to meet our own ordinances on when an application is accepted and put for a public hearing, we almost need to know when we're going to have those pieces of information. Because even once the commission makes a recommendation, you have only a certain amount of time that it can be scheduled on city council. So that's what staff is grappling with. So when do we determine that an application is complete so we can start the process? ACHD hasn't been meeting those timelines in some cases. And so then it makes it difficult for staff to make a recommendation, for the commission to make a recommendation because they don't have all the information.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burt.
Caleb, what normally is like the turnaround time for ACHD? Because that's where the major concern, I mean, when people talk about growth, I mean, I think they're really talking about traffic. And so, like, what is the normal, average turnaround time with getting information from them that's been requested?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilman Burnt. So it does vary. It goes, there's basically 3 levels at ACHD. One is it's so small, they do a no review letter and we get those within a week or 2. There's kind of, 80% of the projects or so, which are generally within a month. And then the other 15% of the projects or so, which require a traffic impact study. And those are the projects that are
the bigger projects.
The bigger projects. Typically, it's 100 single-family units or multifamily units or more, and I think it's like 250,000 square foot of commercial or more. ACHD requires a traffic engineer to prepare a study, comprehend, and that takes more time. The thing that throws a wrench into the works sometimes, so those typically take longer when there's a TIS because there's a technical review. And our process now says we won't schedule you for hearing until ACHD has at least accepted the TIS. And we try to coordinate with them to say, okay, you've accepted it. How long do you think it's going to take you to review it and get your stuff? And we try to guesstimate, but sometimes we miss it. They hit 2 weeks and we missed it by 2 weeks, you know. The other thing that throws a wrench in is ACHD meets once a month. They have a night meeting, and that's typically where they have contentious hearings. It doesn't happen all that often, but even on the 80% of the projects that I mentioned, if there's a neighbor that has a concern about that, and they tell ACHD, I want to address the commission, all of a sudden that project that usually we would hear comments back in a month is now 2 months out because it's got to be on a night meeting. And depending on when they let ACHD know that, you may have just missed the last night meeting, so now you're waiting practically a month to be heard. That just put a wrench in our whole timeline. So we don't really know when we accept an application if it's going to be contentious or not. Sometimes we do, but not all the time. And so we don't know if ACHD commission's going to have to act, or if it can be a staff level, or it can be consent agenda item or a night meeting. So those are some of the variables that kind of roll into this, and why you see sometimes best efforts to coordinate with ACHD, and then something happens and we miss it. So again, generally it's either within a couple weeks, a month, can be up to 3 months. I mean, those are kind of in those same scales of when we can expect ACHD.
Sorry. So generally speaking, when let's just say an average sized development, how long does it usually take from when they turn in their application to when it's heard from planning and zoning?
Madam Mayor, Councilman, again, a lot of variables in there.
You're asking dumb questions right now.
No. There's just a lot of variables. So I'm going to rephrase your question a little bit and say once we have a complete application, because there is some back and forth typically, and that's really when our clock starts, is when we tell you as the applicant, we have everything we need to process it. That's when it's on us now to do our job and to schedule things and get it processed. A lot of times we're missing things that we need to do this correctly. So that's how I'm going to rephrase your question. Typically, though, what we tell applicants is basically when you submit that application that's complete, between 3 and 6 months to get through our process, to go through planning and zoning, to city council, to have your findings, you're done. Doesn't include DA sign, because that can go back and forth with attorneys, but generally from when you submit to when you're done, a 3 to 6 month time frame is what you're looking at. Sorry, I can't narrow that down, but again, there's a lot of variables in there, and 4.5 months then if you want the average. I mean, it's probably about what it is, right?
Right.
Somewhere in there.
All variables that our staff try to diligently juggle.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
Caleb, I think this is great. Thank you all for your work on this and making it more, I think, comprehensive and easier to find things. You mentioned at the beginning that maybe leaving off, I know you should possibly leaving off staff recommendation and also planning and zoning recommendation. I would just say I wouldn't ever recommend leaving off planning and zoning recommendation. And staff, I kind of see both sides on, so I'm on the fence on that one.
If I can just interject,
Sure.
and I know it looks like you're in the middle of a series of questions. So with just staff recommendation, the planning and zoning is charged with sending a recommendation to you. So really, we're kind of putting them a little bit in a bind by not having a recommendation from staff and really having them be the ones that are reading between the lines or reading the analysis to go, I can't really tell if this is a good project or not. We'll hopefully do a good job of explaining that in the analysis, but no, sorry, I didn't really clarify that. You would get a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission as a city council, but they would not be getting one from staff.
Madam Mayor, so with my experience, something I guess that would be really helpful, because to me, staff recommendation means that they meet all of the minimum qualifications, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you highly recommend it. You might hate it, but it meets all the, but you can't really say that. So maybe we had like different colors or different classes of, we recommend with an A, we recommend B, C, kind of give us, right? Then maybe we could differentiate. I don't know what the answer is, but something that you could say staff recommends maybe because they do meet everything, but something more substantial that tells us, do you really think this is a great project, or they just meet all the minimums? So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that one.
Madam Mayor, if I can just follow up on that thought. It's something we've talked about as well. I mean, we really want, for those premier projects, where we're like, hey, this really seems, how can we bring that forward and say, boy, this looks like a solid project. We have talked about doing something.
Strongly recommend.
Yeah, so we'll play
almost
with that.
recommend.
I don't know if it'd be color coded or not, but some way to, hey, we believe this is a premier project, meets all of the standards from Meridian and goes above and beyond, and yeah. So I'll probably just leave it there. So
to me that would be
some more.
That would be the ideal answer as far as I'm concerned. And then on the maps, it has like the different zoning, nearby development, future land use map. And maybe it is there somewhere and I'm not seeing it, but if there's anything, I think the only thing that would be maybe a little bit more adding in here is if there's a recent project that's been approved, but that's not there, or there's another, we just approved 600 apartments and it's in a CG, so we can't even really, you know what I mean? So something like that.
So, Madam Mayor, if I could draw your attention to page 2 then of the staff report, so zoning and nearby development. So if you look at that, what you see on there, and what you don't see is the legend, so we'll have to bring that legend, sorry, it's not.
That's where I was looking.
Page 2 of the staff report, it's actually page 4 of the memo.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at,
yeah.
those maps.
So if you look at it, I know it's a little subtle, especially at that scale, and again, something we can play with. Don't want to make this take up a whole page because we're trying to really get the first 2 pages, everything, and don't want it to be the first 6 pages to have all this, but if it's something that's that important. But if you look at some of the line work on there, so the project site in this case is a triangle. You can actually see underneath that to some degree their proposal. So it's not approved even there. But if you look on the south, that's the Berea project. And if you look kind of where the R is and the R8, those are actually subdivided, platted, existing lots. The red lot lines are preliminary platted, so those don't exist, but they are approved. So you approved a preliminary plat, but this is a phased project. So only 40 lots are actually on the ground, but there's another 300 and again, there's some subtleties there in the reds and the gray lines, but that's really what, in the legend, we can call that out a little bit more and say, yeah, if you looked at the aerial for the R8, you'd see those. You wouldn't see anything else around it. This shows you what's coming.
Yeah, that's
everything else.
Perfect.
So that's kind of the idea.
So we just need to have the key to.
Yeah, we haven't fully developed that, but we'll have a legend that says, hey, red lines are preliminarily approved, gray lines are existing lots, homes are
That's
there
perfect.
Essentially.
And then like where it's CN and CG, there's like nothing in there.
Right. So those may be just and we can work with this too. The other thing that you don't see is an aerial. So an aerial will help as well. So if you can see, like for instance, there's 10 Mile Christian Church on the CN. Right on the corner. That's 10 Mile Christian. So yes, that's developed, and we got a city well site and storage units, and so there's other things going on there. So I think we can do a better job through a series of maps showing an aerial, zoning, and approved development in the area that really gives you a complete picture of what's in that area.
Thank you.
Mr. Burnt.
Caleb, one last thing. I just want to let you know that, and also Cameron and your department, and Bruce and Bill and all that, you guys that are here. I just, as a body, and I'm sure speaking on behalf of the mayor as well, thank you so much for the extra work that this is going to take you guys. I know you guys are super bombarded. I know that you guys are super busy, and I know that you guys have a ton on your plate, and we're asking you to do one more thing. So I just want to make it clear that how much that's appreciated and how much we at least truly appreciate your work and your dedication to making what we do easier. And so, thank you.
Well, Madam Mayor, I do appreciate those comments, and I'm going to speak on behalf of our department just for a minute. I mean, we do pride ourselves in helping you, giving you whatever information you need to do your job. We also take pride in working with existing residents and constituents, as well as developers and others that come through you're all customers. So we want to make sure we try to do the best we can multiple audiences, a lot of times multiple interests, but trying to serve everybody with their needs. So yeah, whatever we can do to help you going forward, this one thing, if it's something else, please let us know. We'll do the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other feedback? Mr. Borton?
Madam Mayor, this, in no particular order, some food for thought. I think if the staff report needs to come out the weekend before at the latest, whatever format this is, at the latest. And if it's like Wednesday the week before, anything Monday is just devastatingly difficult for public and the development community. So we can schedule things accordingly, but it's got to be out and complete for that Friday. I think it's helpful to everybody in the presentation to use Google Maps at the start to kind of narrate in a 3D form. Here's where we're at. We refer back to it and then have it available to show topography and roadway improvements. It might not be totally up to date, but keeps us from looking at it up here. I think everyone helps everyone make a good decision. No, and we've called out and asked planning staff to pull one up, and I think it's helpful. So let's just, we can use it all the time. I'm not pointing fingers. Some metrics on this summary of the report, which I think are, add in, I agree with Councilman Burnt, to know either staff report, yes, no, or not applicable from ACHD, Compass, ITD, school district, some maybe NAs that might not be applicable, but that would be helpful. I think a summary that says, because it's all relative, but neighborhood meetings, date, location, and number of attendees.
Okay.
Some of these have one person show up, some have 500. And it's a nice heads up. I think some commentary from whoever's presenting the application, it's kind of nice to hear some of the story very briefly about the dialogue that goes on between our staff and the applicant. Of, we met and we talked about this, and they started with 110 lots and we worked, and now it's 96 lots and we've made adjustments, and that collaborative approach kind of tells the story as it gets to P&Z and then to us, that there's been some good give and take, and they've had good feedback from the direction that you all can provide and what the city's going to be looking for. I don't know if that necessarily translates into some of the narrative on the revised staff report, but I think a lot of good work's being done there that will be helpful to us, that this isn't necessarily something that's just being jammed down the city, that there hasn't been concessions and amendments to try and make it better. The comments from public safety, for example, but all of our agencies, I think, are really helpful. I think when it happens at the council meeting, it's really late and it can be difficult for the applicant. One of the examples that came up, and I forget what the project was, but there was a park location that was kind of tucked behind homes on almost all sides, and we got some great feedback from police about view corridors and public safety, and kind of foreseeing that direction to come to the developer early, that if our law enforcement community has concerns, that is made known to them early in the process. So to invite that input is, I think, very helpful. And we can see that in here. And if it's the paragraph saying, we looked at it and we're comfortable with the open space and safety corridors, and maybe it's a short paragraph, but something like that shows our internal agencies have looked at it, I think is helpful. In the noticing section, we use Nextdoor. It's helpful to say when that was posted, so we're aware of the means in which we provided notice. I think the maps are great on this. I wouldn't necessarily try and smoosh them all into, it's a third page, so be it. Maps really tell a great story at the start, to say, here's kind of the context of what's being presented to the city. I love maps. I'm a visual guy though, but I think they help. As for the recommendations, a couple of thoughts on that. if it's happened, it's rare, but I don't recall, and I'll use the traditional annexation zoning preliminary plat concept where an applicant's come forward that's been compliant with our requirements, but the staff has recommended denial. So it's always a recommendation of approval, and really sometimes it's an approval, and sometimes you can kind of read between the lines and it's saying it's compliant. It's really not a robust advocacy for the project necessarily. So if there's not ever recommendations of denial, then the recommendation issue causes some concern and maybe some false hope, either in the applicant or false concern in the public saying, well, this thing's just flying through. And one of the contexts where that comes up is in the scenarios where you have an annexation zoning and you got a variance, and there may be a case where the staff report says a recommendation of approval on things, but deny the variance. If you deny the variance, it changes the plat, which might change the whole project, so you're really recommending approval of the whole project. You don't have the variance that necessitates the whole thing being successful. To do that up here at that council meeting is really problematic. So I don't know if I have an answer to that one, but that's some of my concern with the recommendation concept is, well, I don't know how much it really is a recommendation, as opposed to saying it's compliant. I don't have an answer to that one, but the variance issue really highlights where that conflicts. So I love these improvements, and to the extent it can help the public when they see it, understand the analysis, and help the developer not get surprised, all the better. But I don't know how to do the recommendation part.
Madam Mayor? I've always interpreted the recommendation, perhaps incorrectly, as more of a statement of we recommend approval as this is consistent with similar recent approvals than so much a statement as recommended because of its level of compliance. Has that been a factor at all?
No, Madam Mayor, and that is essentially what staff is charged with doing. We are looking for code compliance, but a lot of the times your conditions of approval get you to code compliance. It's not what they're proposing is code compliant. It's with the conditions of approval that make you code compliant. So that's sort of even to the variance question. And maybe a little bit where I think we need some direction even on this to some degree, because there is a story on most of these projects. We've met with them, and it started out as 110 units. When he thought that was too many, got them down to 90 with this layout. You know, we do a lot of that. It doesn't always come through in a staff report that way, but we do work with applicants to get something that we think fits, our community a lot of times. And I guess where I'm going with that is we try to get to yes. Historically, we've tried to get you to code compliant, and we'll change your thing to meet our code and say, yeah, now you can do it. If you change this, and this, you can do that. It's labor intensive, and how much time should we invest with folks to say, okay, I guess, but what happens if you don't get your access to the state highway? Now what does it look like? And you meet with us in 2 weeks and see if you can change it. Well, no, we didn't change that, but we changed this. What do you think of this now? How much time do we spend with them on trying to get something, or should we just be the code folks and code compliant? We really don't. And I think as a planner myself, I don't write staff reports anymore. But not that I think that I have the best ideas for what, but I do. Yes, there's some objective things in code that needs to be compliant. But I feel like I've got a pretty good idea what you all want to see and what the rest of the community wants to see in a project. Maybe code compliant, but still the design may suck. That's part of my job, is to call that out and say, you know what, you tick off all the boxes, but this layout that has a circular thing and all the houses are the same, and there's nothing here. This isn't Premier, right? I mean, that's part of the job. So I guess I'm rambling a little bit on the whole staff recommendation thing, but you're sort of taking some of that away from staff, which is fine. If that's what you guys want us to do, I think we can do it. But that's not typically what we've done. Is we try to get these projects to, yes, be code compliant, but be something that we can be proud of too, most of the time. So no, that's how staff recommendations are typically, staff reports are typically written, is there's a little bit of each staff planner in that report.
So, Madam Mayor, in that example though, would you envision the planner on that project to come forward and say, it's kind of round and boxy and it's compliant, but I told them to change it and they said no, so,
Yeah.
I mean, would you really envision, which may be valuable to us to hear that perspective.
This is really where, sorry to interrupt, this is really kind of the conflicting information that maybe we're hearing as staff. A little bit of the feedback we're getting is you all want to make that decision, which you do. You have that authority. You're the decision makers. You don't want staff's recommendation. You don't want us to do that. So we'd ask you to look at it, and then you get to decide if you like those boxes or not. And you're not asking us. You're only asking us to say, does this meet the minimums? We'll decide if we like it or not. But that conflicts what you said, Councilman Borton, a little bit about that certainty going into a project. And it's a crapshoot then for the development community. I don't know if council's going to like it. Maybe they like it tonight, but I have indigestion and I'm mad at you tonight, and we're not going to approve your project even though everything's code compliant. I mean, I don't think they're that way, but that's some of what the fear could be. Is I'm not in a good mood, or it's 11 o'clock at night, everyone wants to go home, so we're just going to deny the thing. I don't know. The other part I kind of understand and I appreciate to some degree. Staff is on the hot seat, right? We hear the staff reports go out, ideally the weekend before, and the neighbors get it. And they're calling staff. Why are you recommending approval of this thing? What are you thinking? This is a horrible project. So trying to take some of the heat off of staff, and I appreciate that to some degree. And that's where we can't say, well, it meets code. I mean, it's generally compliant. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. But I do appreciate that to some degree. But at the same time, we're trying to take some of the heat off of you. You know, that's part of our job, is to explain why we think this is a good project. Or not. But whatever the recommendation is, then we're talking to the applicant if it's not. Again, pros and cons to that, a staff recommendation. I think the Planning and Zoning Commission actually may be the one that gets the brunt of this a little bit more if we do go with a no recommendation. But
what is your recommendation as far as making a recommendation? And in doing so, would you ever envision making a recommendation of denial in any situation to P&Z? Truly going to have recommendations.
Yeah.
That would contemplate that you might, in some circumstances, say, you shouldn't approve this project, P&Z, from our planning perspective.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Morton, I do kind of like where Councilwoman Milam's going with the levels of compliance or approval or whatever we want to call that, and maybe it's a 0 to 5 scorecard or something. I don't know. Again, there's some subjectivity in there, but it kind of shows, how. I wouldn't have it be a scorecard, but yeah, I do envision us potentially saying, calling a spade, and saying, listen, you can probably see it yourself, but we're going to call it out here, and we're recommending denial of your project because that is not what we need in our community at this location at this time. So yeah, I could envision a scenario where we still recommend denial, unless, again, the direction is, no, your job, do code compliance, and we'll decide if we like it or not. If that's the direction we're given, we'll do that too.
I'm going to forget what I was going to say. A long time. Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milo.
Okay, so Caleb, you said something a minute ago that made me go, whoa. So at least for myself, that I think that you don't understand, at least where I'm coming from.
Okay.
And it's not that I think we should make the decision, and it's because that we don't want the recommendation. It's actually the opposite for me. So as long as I've been here, almost 5 years, there's never been a recommendation of denial. And I've been told that that's because basically if they comply, you have to recommend approval for the most part. And that's, so when one of the planners are sitting over there and it says recommendation of approval, and I know how that development, that project is part of that person and how much time they've spent with that. And it says recommendation of approval, but they don't really mean it. I don't want to discredit all of the work that they've put in and approve a project that they don't truly believe in. They just made it better than the dog crap that it was when it first walked in. So do you see where I'm coming from? I do want the recommendation, but I only want it if it's genuine. That's why I say the different levels. I care very much what staff thinks and all of the work that you put in. I do want that recommendation. I just don't want it if it's false.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you want to hear a genuine recommendation from staff. I mean, really, that they should be. We aren't trying to put lipstick on a pig, but quite honestly, you can condition the heck out of any project to make it nice. Right, enough conditions. I just redesigned your site for you in enough conditions, and that's where we, again, historically, our mindset has been get to yes. So we will condition the heck out of your project to make it acceptable. And I think maybe that is shifting a little bit to say, you know what, we don't have time to babysit your project and write 5 pages of conditions of approval. If you don't get it right, or at least close, we don't think it's a good, maybe the recommendation's for denial now, because there's just so many things you have wrong.
And acceptable is not good enough.
Yeah. And again, that's the type of feedback I think we need to hear from council is, and the message isn't, we're not going to work with you as an applicant to get you there, but if what you, at the end of the day, after we've had these meetings, before you submit, you still submit to us to process crap, we're going to review your crap and say, this is it. And we're not going to try to make it
level 1
nicer. We really don't have the resources going forward. We're being stretched in so many different directions. And that's why I think we're going to go to this code compliant type of recommendation is, yeah, we've worked with them. They've done what we've asked them to do. This looks pretty good. I shouldn't say pretty good. This looks great.
Okay, yeah.
And Caleb, if that gives you some material to really work with the applicant to meeting the code and the intent, I think that's very fair. And to Councilman Milam's point is, you know, we don't want you to put lipstick on the pig and say, well, I think it's improved enough for approval when you say that in clenched teeth. But, and how long did it take you to even get to that, to your point, is very relevant. But at some point, you just need to make it clear to the applicants when they walk in the door, you know, here are the expectations that your application needs to meet.
That's fair, I think, to everybody, yeah.
Okay. I think council, if we can just ask you to kind of look at that and apply it to maybe applications that you've seen in the past and thought, wow, if I would have had this information and it's not on here, if you will just let Caleb know and we can bring this back. Some of those items that we will be bringing back as well as those areas in the code that was discussed in May in terms of here are the different areas that you've indicated that we want to discuss and maybe look at the minimums, see if they are still what we want as minimum. But we do need prioritization of those different areas so that staff can start spending time and working on those. And I think that also coming is the comprehensive plan and how best to deal with applications as they come as well, seeking your direction on that. Anything further on this item?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
If we're going to have a discussion about the numbers and the actual minimums at a later date, you know, we're 3 weeks out from the time that we turned down an application that exceeded every minimum. And as he had pointed out, when he had brought a similar project before, that we told him, bring more things like this, then when he does, even better than that, it was denied. I think in the meantime, before we even get to that conversation, we need to be able to let at least the active applicants know whether the minimums as they are now are acceptable. Because if they aren't, then are we going to deny every project between now and when we change the minimums? Where do you want to go with this?
I don't think that was posted as an item to discuss tonight, but we do need to have that discussion. And Bill, when is that denial on the city council agenda? Is that next week?
Madam Mayor, you're talking about Entrada Farms? The findings were approved today.
Okay.
So to add another wrinkle maybe to what Councilman Palmer raised, and as you're thinking as you go through the reports, right now a majority of the projects that you see are driven by annexation, which gives the city great discretion on whether to annex a property and then commit to whatever they've proposed to do with it. But you will see, and this is why I think it's a work in progress with planning and with the council and the commission and legal on how these reports look, because you will get to projects that are infill developments, that are already existing annexed property, and the state code requires we tell them what can they do to be approved. So here where we're talking about projects that the decision to annex drives all of the discussion, and you're not obligated to tell them what to do to be approved. You can simply not like it and deny it. We will, in working through these reports, try to make sure that when we're talking about ones that require that we cannot simply just say no. We have to say no unless you're willing to do X, Y, and Z to then be approved, as Caleb said, in providing those conditions. So as you're looking at the reports, there's two different things that you have to factor in defending your decision is, again, what were they requesting? And secondarily, are we required by code for planning to tell them what they can do, or the council or the commission to tell them what they can do to be approved? So those issues are there. But if to go back to Councilman Palmer's question, I mean, since those findings were approved for Entrada Farms, if there's a request for reconsideration, they have 14 days from today to request that. And I don't know if that's what you were bringing up, but that would be the timeline of that particular project. But if you're saying, should everybody else be told, I think everybody else is always under the understanding that in an annexation, it is always the council's discretion on whether to annex property and whether or not to add it to your city. I don't think anybody perceives that they have some entitlement other than to simply ask.
Madam Mayor, I understand that just because we can do whatever the heck we want with an annexation doesn't mean that we necessarily should. We have guidelines out there as to what is a quality project to this council. And when an applicant exceeds every one of those and brings us something better than something that we've told them, bring us more like this, how are we doing our jobs when we tell that applicant, go pound sand, thanks for playing, thanks for your money, thanks for spending $115,000 preparing something for us to have something to do on a Tuesday night to talk about? I mean, we spent an hour talking about different things, trying to find a reason not to like the project, and when we couldn't figure it out, we said, it's not in the best interests of the city. That was our reasoning for not approving the project. So we've got a bunch of projects in the pipeline. Are we interested in approving things? If we're not interested in approving things that exceed all of our minimums, then we need to let them know, hey, we can't handle the influx of people. We're not approving things right now. We haven't, I mean, given the agendas and lack of one meeting, we haven't discussed any projects since, but we have them coming up on our next agenda, and are they gonna waste their time or not?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, if I can, and I'm not, I want to just explain, I can't do much for the people that are in the pipeline now, but I do want to, and I should have done this as part of my presentation. So yes, we're working with departments on staff report writing, but we want to be upfront with applicants. Where fire is now coming and police are coming to our pre-app meetings to say, our response times are 7 minutes out here. Staff report may say, until Station 7's built, we don't want to go out here. So we're kind of going that way, not with, in UDC, the planning code, design stuff, but levels of service stuff that have been of concern. we're starting to bring that up if there are issues with our service providers, to tell folks up front and early and often, if, hey, watch out when the staff report comes down, we may say, we have difficulty jumping over there to service it. So I just wanted to add that into our process. We're trying to disclose it. Not that we're closed for business, but when there may be an issue, those service providers are coming to our early meetings to talk with them and say, maybe have some concern here. So thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
Madam Mayor. And I appreciate that, giving them a heads up as to recent council decisions, at the least of the topics of discussion for the decision.
I think it's important to note one denial doesn't make a mandate. And I think the council articulated some of the concerns of multiple owners, design, no phasing. There were several things that went behind that denial. And those are pretty specific to just that application. You can't use that as a blanket to say, oh, we don't want any more development. So I do think that by having other departments, our service providers, more integrated into the early pre-apps, that there aren't surprises and they at least have a heads up on some of the issues that could come down the pike as they bring their application to the public process. And I think they're forewarned.
Madam Mayor, I mean, I'd accept that point if, anyone could tell me the last time we denied a project of apartments because they were going to have multiple owners or because of their phasing or lack thereof plan or any of the reasons that we denied this. I mean,
Madam Mayor?
location.
Mr. Burns.
I don't remember a time when there were over 60 owners in one application. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, that was one of the things that I had a concern with, but just in response to your question, I respect your question, but that was my thought process when he said that there was going to be upwards of 60 owners, possible, with that development. So that was my concern.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
The question that was asked to him was how many potential owners could there be? And he said, well, if only one person, but
Well,
if everybody
I
only bought
don't think
one
we
at a
need
time.
to regurgitate the public hearing but I think the point is we're trying to bring up issues that might come out in public testimony or comments early on, so the applicant is forewarned or at least has an idea of what former decisions have been, what concerns are as it pertains to being able to serve our future citizens to the same level of service that our citizens expect today, and learn every time. I think almost every application can be different enough. I think staff could tell you how many different scenarios they see that they have to come up with recommendations are. We can't legislate every single thing. And as the decision makers, being able to articulate some of the concerns, that's what we're trying to get in this discussion so that we can let people know as they walk in the door, both as our residents and what we expect of a development, and our investors, what we expect of a development. If you have any additional feedback, that would be great to get it to Caleb, and we can integrate it into our staff reports. Anything further on this item?
Nope. Thanks, Caleb. Hope you feel better.
Yes. And thank you for sitting in, staff, on the discussion and trying to see where we're coming from. Thank you. Okay. Anything under future meeting topics? We We do have a budget hearing coming up, and the Main Street Market is in full swing. If you haven't come down there, invite you down. There's a lot of both fresh produce and baked goods and jellies and jams and all kinds of fun items.
Steaks,
Yes,
seasoning.
Yeah. So, item 10, executive session.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
we'll go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-206, 1A, B, C, D, and J.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn into executive session. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes.